Elena, can you hear us all right?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
All right. If I get stuck, I'm gonna go back to my.
You want to go ahead?
Fine, that's.
Mary and Kirk, can you hear me all right?
Yep, I can hear you. I can hear you. I can't see anybody.
You should see us soon.
But church.
All right, we're gonna get started in just a minute.
There's still a plan for George or you to, you're gonna vacate the chair position and then he's gonna take over for that. Okay. Okay.
That's my statement, and George, can I add down a paragraph to George about the remedy? $7 o'clock, I guess. Call this meeting, whoa, works now. We call this meeting to order. Have a roll call.
We have 28 present and 2 absent.
And Supervisor Morris is excused tonight. Okay, I have a pledge, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Winnicky, could you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like you to take a brief moment to think about what you're our meeting tonight and your decisions to be made. Please be seated. We're in compliance with the open meetings law.
We are, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded by, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved as printed. Approval of the September 14th, 2021 meeting minutes. Ms. Renard,
I move approval of the minutes as presented.
do I have a second? Second by Supervisor Backlund. Questions, additions, subtractions? All in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, they are approved. Communications.
You have several reports. The first one is the net new construction 2021. You also have the 2021 county apportionment. You have the treasurer's report. We have some retirement recognitions, and then you also have the notice of the zoning committee's public hearing, which is October 21st at 7 p.m. in room 205.
Thank you. I'll move to public comment. I have. Oh, so I'm sorry. We have retirement recognition first then. I'm sorry.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I'm going to keep it short, but I do have a couple of department heads that I would like to have come forward just to say a few words to our retirees. In the last quarter, we did have 5 retirees. The shortest term person that was with us was almost 20 years, so that's over 134 years between 5 individuals. The first is Dale Talamantes from the Child Support Office. She was an administrative assistant there. Jeff Charlo from the Highway Department for over 22 years, almost 23 years. And I was really wishing he was going to show up tonight, kind of make his last minute entrance like he was famous for. But then I would also like to call up Patricia Cicero. She would like to say a few words to a recent retiree in her office.
Thank you. Nancy Lannert was the resource conservationist in our office, and she retired a few months ago. And she had been with the county for just over 19 years. Before that, she worked in Rock County doing the same job, and so she worked in conservation for a total of 34 years, which is really great. She wasn't able to come tonight, but she just wanted to extend her thanks to everybody. And when I was talking to her last week, she let me know she bought a new dog, and it's a bloodhound, so she said it was like a big pony. And we started laughing because we had a joke in our office that we needed to have a county pony so that we could get to all the fields to look at them. So Nancy finally has her county pony.
Patricia, I like that lead into the budget coming up. We need a pony. And then I'd like Kathy Colley, please, to come forward from the Human Services Department with a couple of retirees from her office.
Hello, everyone. It's really my pleasure, truly my pleasure, to recognize these two employees this evening. The first one is Mary Wendt. Mary started with Jefferson County in 1990 in our health department. She then became an economic support worker. She did childcare for many years in W-2 when W-2 was part of our agency. She has truly been a part of every economic support program that was administered through our agency. She then became a lead economic support worker. And while other consortiums had some mighty struggles, our consortium succeeded in implementing every change and having the highest performance measures in the state. Mary was key in making the call center a success. She mentored numerous workers and coworkers. She was always truly dedicated to helping coworkers and consumers alike. She was determined that each person she interacted with would have a positive outcome. I want to share a testimonial from a past coworker. Mary was the first person who ever told me that I had given someone incorrect information. She somehow found a way to tell me in a matter-of-fact way, without judgment, that has always stuck with me and always will. She is someone who truly cared about not only her coworkers, but those that we serve. She was an amazing teacher, and we always knew she was someone we could ask questions of. She would dig deep to find the most complete answer. She followed up with an email, the policy reference, the operation memo, or a reference to the meeting notes. She was more than a go-to person for work questions. She was there to listen when something troubled you. She listened to every concern. She helped manage the ups and downs of our workplace and provided care and support to every team member. Mary, it's truly my honor to recognize your exemplary service, your career, and character. 31 years with Jefferson County. Please know you've made a difference and you are missed. Alrighty. And then I also have the pleasure this evening of recognizing Jill Johnson. Jill had an extraordinary career with Jefferson County, and let's start with just some basic facts. She started in 1982. She rarely took a day off in her 39 years. She routinely donated vacation time to others. Jill believes in serving her community. She always volunteered for other community agencies. Jill would be found during the holiday season ringing the bell for Salvation Army. She served on and still does serve the Community Action Coalition on their board of directors. Above and beyond these efforts, she dedicated numerous non-work hours to Ready Kids. Her efforts and leadership helped Ready Kids evolve to a full-scale resource for every child in need of school supplies in our community. In 2012, our Economic Support Division began to provide all services through a consortium with 7 other counties. Reorganizing all work procedures from one worker caseload model to a 7-county call center consortium model was an enormous undertaking. Due largely to Jill's leadership, expertise, poise, and yes, patience, our Southern Consortium became a leader in the state. The transition was smooth and focused on consumer needs, a true reflection of Jill's values. Over the next 9 years, at various times, Jill would serve as a manager for the consortium, leading 7 other counties, in addition to her full-time job as our economic support division manager. She was truly a subject expert and led our division and other counties in a calm and compassionate manner while educating and coaching everyone. She was able to seamlessly step in the most complex and acute issues with consumers. And just one testimonial from one of her past coworkers, there is no one defining story about Jill because it was all the little things she did and how they added up and how she attended to everything and everyone. It was for our entire work family at the Workforce Development Center. Every question was answered with patience. Every request was responded to with speed and grace. Every error or mistake was addressed with kindness and with the intent to help us learn. Criticism was constructive, never in a way that made everyone feel like less of a person. She was never too busy. She never made someone feel as if they were imposing. She was compassionate and professional in all professional and personal matters. She always encouraged me to move forward, to do more, and to be my best. I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for her. Jill, it is truly my honor to recognize you tonight. You've had an extraordinary career because you're an extraordinary person and leader. You made sure that public benefits were available for all who are eligible. You led our division through enormous change. You developed great employees and awesome people, and you made a difference in the lives of many. Congratulations.
Thank you. And congratulations. And did you announce the zoning public hearing? Okay, all right. Okay, that moves us into public comment. We have 7 signed up for public comment. We have 3 minutes each. So David Stouty. Take the mic right there. Yeah. Okay. You got the floor.
Okay. Well, this is pertaining to Castle. I can't believe it. 1 year later, we're still talking about this. Whatchamacallit, everybody, I keep on hearing how great this is, how great this is. As long as it's not their backyard, everything's okay. What about the local residents? It's A3. A3 is not a wedding venue, parties, and so on. Okay, the whole neighborhood, a nice, warm, hot summer night. You go out, you want to, in the evening, you want to hear the birds sing. You're going to have music, people laughing, cars going down the road. Like I say, it's not in our backyard. As long as it's not our backyard, everything's okay. Well, we don't want to put up with that. As far as people that are for it, it's nobody from around here as far as the castle goes. Whatchamacallit, these people that own the castle, we have parties. What do? They go home at the end of the night and go on the other side of the county where they live in their nice cozy house. So that's about all I got to say.
Thank you. That leads us to, I can't read the first, Benz, what was the first name? Yeah. Mr. Benz. So,
I'm Tom Benz. I'm here because my family farm, my wife and I bought 48 years ago, was right over the hill, butts up to the Mueller property. My son couldn't make it tonight because we got 2 granddaughters in volleyball. But I'm here because of the concerns, the way this is being handled. We did everything correctly. The neighbors got together when they found out about this, formed a petition circulated it, had 27 adjacent landowners sign this, plus the Mueller family, who owns the 38 acres surrounding this 2-acre parcel. And then we went to 3 county board hearings. Each one of those voted unanimously to oppose this, deny this request. But here we are, still here tonight. And I don't care how many people from Facebook and around the area, as Steve Knott said in the last meeting I attended, the only people that count are the people who get that yellow letter who are adjacent landowners. And I will guarantee you, every one of those signed that petition and nobody's changed their mind. And if this is what zoning ordinances have come to, where this a committee that is appointed and put in place to see that the Jefferson County zoning ordinances are upheld and adhered to, is completely ignored. And I think they finally gave up because they figured they were swimming upstream. And now I'm hearing some rumors about these going around the county board, directly to the county board, going around the zoning committee to smooth and politic the county board members directly. And I'm hearing some really disturbing things about this, about the visits out there and other things. And that's a matter for another venue at another time. But right now, I think it's time they listen to the people who are directly affected by this, who are the 27 people and whoever get those yellow letters. They're the only ones who have standing in this, not some people from Facebook or wherever. I just can't believe this is still going on. Thank you.
I believe this is Patricia Strobush. It's nice handwriting, but still.
Hello, my name is Patricia Strobush, and I live in Cambridge in the town of Oakland. I spoke at last month's meeting along with several other people in support of the zoning change request by Paul Elliott and Diane Owens for the Wisteria Castle. I thank you for listening to all who spoke in regard to this zoning change request. I attend many public meetings and have served on several boards. I find that most often people only attend meetings when they oppose an issue, have a concern or need clarification on an issue, or in support of an issue. I would like to once again express my support of this rezoning request, but I also want to say thank you to the county board members who voted and showed their strong support for the rezoning of the Wisteria Castle. Thank you.
And then we have Robert Casper.
I'd just like to say that I don't agree with this castle. We moved out in the country to have the peace and quiet, and we're not going to have that any longer. Been to thousands of parties, I'm sure everybody has. You know, they get loud, they get obnoxious. We're trying to sleep. My wife works 2 jobs, one during the day and one third shift. She has to sleep in between. I don't know how she's going to do that when you got a party down the road. Not to mention, the roads are not set up for this kind of traffic. You're going to have vendors, you're going to have people, they're going to be parking on the street. The roads ain't that good a shape. They're not that wide. How are people going to get through? You're going to have people that are drinking and leaving this party, and you got these kids on 4-wheelers because all the roads are open to 4-wheelers now. You're just waiting for an accident to happen. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I have Linda Casper.
Like my husband said, we moved 5 years ago to the country. We deliberately looked for a property that was going to be quiet because, like he said, I work during the day and I also work a third shift job. I need to be able to sleep at night. I don't feel like I should have to keep the windows closed in the middle of summer to keep the noise out. Also, what is going to happen to the property values out there? I mean, we're in the middle of the country and all of a sudden you're taking a building that was not meant for a business but for a home and turning that into a business where you're going to have the traffic and the noise I feel it's going to lower the property values in that area. I understand it's your dream to do this, but your dream was done without checking to see if it was even feasible before you started it. And I wish there was a way this could work, but I don't feel like the neighbors should have to give up their rights to peace and quiet for someone else's dream that they came up with after and without checking beforehand to see if it would be possible. Thank you.
And then I have Chris Miller.
Dear Jefferson County Board members, my name is Chris Miller, property owner, along with my father and my brother, Tim Miller of N7036 Saucer Drive of Watertown. We're opposed to the county application for rezoning of 2 acres from A3 to A2 to allow for a conditional use of agricultural tourism and wedding venue at N7040 Saucer Drive, requested by Diane Owens and Paul Elliott. We strongly urge you, the board, to deny this ordinance amendment. Please be aware that we have taken the opportunity twice now to address the Jefferson County Planning and Zoning Commission, and twice this proposal has been denied. Over the past year, I've been impressed with the Planning and Zoning Committee's commitment to follow and abide by the Agricultural Preservation and Land Use Plan and to apply sound reasoning and common sense in this situation. I hope the County Board also upholds these plans and values. Together with my dad and brother, we own 3 separate tax parcels totaling 36 acres completely surrounding, or in other words, adjoining on all 4 sides, the N7040 Saucer Drive. 2 of these parcels are zoned A3 rural residential with the potential for an additional A3 lot within our 30-acre parcel, which would also be adjoining to N7040 due to it being a non-prime split location and as the only lot that is still, or area that it's still available in. These lots have been clustered as in accordance to the Agricultural Preservation and Land Use Plan. Allowing this property to be used as a wedding venue would adversely affect these rural residential lots in that it would no longer allow for reasonable, safe, quiet, rural enjoyment due to their close proximity. The home at N7040 Saucer Drive is 50 yards and within full view of the currently occupied residential farmhouse. Currently, all that has been done to hint at addressing this problem is moving a few rocks in place on one of the property lines. If this is all that has been done now to address this significant proximity concern, I have nightmares to think of what will actually occur when partygoers and wedding party entourage descend upon this limited space property. The situation in its entirety will likely result in decreased property values, which has already been mentioned, potential need for police intervention to ensure the rights of private property are upheld, an unsafe situation for my young children who enjoy the land with me, and an ongoing negative relationship between residential property owners and the owners of N7040 Saucer Drive. Within my planning and research for this meeting, I found many county board members are rural residents themselves. I ask you to take a moment and empathize the situation. How would you feel if your rural neighbor turned their house into a wedding venue? Throughout this proposal process, Diane Owens and Paul Elliott have continually referred to the castle as their home, which is exactly what it is. It is a beautiful, large, single-family residence that sits on 2 acres of land. By approving this ordinance amendment, the county board would be setting an absurd precedent that any single-family home sitting on 2 acres within Jefferson County can be turned into a wedding venue. If Jefferson County desires an additional wedding venue so badly, I urge you to find a suitable location and financially support Diane Owens and Paul Elliott in achieving this goal. Please do not do it at our expense. Please consider how you would feel if it would occur at your expense in the same situation. In the event that the county board overlooks the recommendations from the Planning and Zoning Commission, diverts from upholding the Jefferson County Agricultural Preservation and Land Use Plan as it speaks directly about adverse effects of rejoining on adjoining properties, rejects the fact that the structure at N7040 Saucer Drive was built after 1970 and in no way is related to agricultural tourism and therefore does not qualify to be used for an agricultural tourism facility, and fails to apply the same scenario to themselves if they were faced with a wedding venue in your rural Jefferson County backyard. Please be aware I am aware of my right and will proceed to appeal this decision to an objective circuit court judge for further review. We look forward to continuing to build our relationship with our residential neighbors, Diane Owens and Paul Elliott. I thank you for your time and again urge you to deny this ordinance amendment request to convert this single-family home at N7040 Saucer Drive into a wedding venue. Thank you.
And lastly, we have Tim Miller.
Dear board members, thank you for your time. My name is Timothy Mueller Jr., property owner at N7063 Saucer Drive, Farmington. I am opposed to the county application for a rezoning of 2.002 acres from A3 to A2 to allow for a conditional use for agricultural tourism at N7040 Saucer Drive. I wasn't aware that this topic was on your last meeting agenda, or I would have come and spoke. When I heard what happened at your meeting, and I watched it on YouTube after the fact, I wasn't going to come tonight as it sounded to me like it was already decided. However, I felt compelled because I not only see the situation at hand, but I see how it plays into a much bigger picture. Oftentimes I look around at the world that we live in and wonder, what is going on? Turn on one news station and I get the news from their perspective. And I turn on another station, it's the same event, but the messaging is completely different. The news outlets play off of people's emotions to turn people's thinking to one side or another. I know that you all know what I mean. When you step back from this situation, this is what we have. This is what we're involved in. Sure, smaller scale, I get it, but yet very real. Emotions are involved. Narratives are involved. Goodness, the front page of the paper is involved. I didn't rally people tonight to speak in favor of my opinion. I didn't send you letters as board members. I didn't walk you around my property on our trails with my 4 kids. I didn't contact news outlets. Instead, I simply point out 2 facts. I try to make decisions on my day-to-day based on facts. I'm a human being too. I have emotion, all right? And emotion's good. We want that. But yet when it comes to decision making, it's appropriate that it's based and steeped in facts. And these are the 2 facts. There's no agricultural connection here. None. There's nothing agriculture about this. 2. This castle sits on 2 acres that are completely surrounded by someone else's A3 rural residential property. The castle is not on a large country parcel. It's not even in the corner of a parcel. It is in the middle of a parcel. There were some misnomers that were communicated last time. Somebody would jumped on their iPad and did a Google satellite or a Google map, and they said these words, something to the effect of, don't quote me, but it was said something like this: no one is within a third or a half of a mile. It's just not true. These are facts. They can't be argued or skewed. This is what decisions should be made from. Not how you feel about the owners or how the tour went or how the newspaper portrayed it. Don't succumb here in Jefferson County with the ways our society is going. I didn't come tonight to simply sway you in your decision making. I came to remind you of the facts and encourage you to vote based on them. But mostly, as a member of our society, as a dad, as a citizen, I came to bring light to the fact that within this decision are traces of what we all don't want in our world. Narratives, messaging, all with some sort of slant that feeds off of emotion, ignoring the facts. Facts. No applause after this. It's not about raising ruckus in our county. It's about making decisions based on the facts.
Your time is.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. My wife and my children and I appreciate your time and efforts. and your service to our county. Thank you.
Thank you. That completes our public comment portion of the meeting, which leads us to item number 8, which is a Planning and Zoning Committee. At this point, because I'm the Vice Chair of the Planning and Zoning Committee, I'm going to step down from the chairmanship temporarily here, and Supervisor Renard of our Vice Chair will take over the meeting. Okay. We can handle A and B first before I step down. Okay. Let's go to item A. Mr. Jekyll, the report.
Report to the honorable members of the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors. Jefferson County Planning and Zoning Committee, having considered petitions to amend the official zoning map of Jefferson County, filed for public hearing held on August 19th and September 16th, 2021, as required by law pursuant to Wisconsin statutes. Notice thereof having been given and being duly advised by the wishes of the town boards and persons in the areas affected, hereby makes the following recommendations. Approval of petitions as listed. Dated this 27th day of September 2021 by Blaine Paulson, Secretary. And move on to ordinance number 2021 9, amending Jefferson County zoning map. Whereas Jefferson County Board of Supervisors has heretofore been petitioned to amend the Jefferson County zoning map of Jefferson County, and whereas petitions as listed were referred to the Jefferson County Planning and Zoning Committee for public hearing on September 16, 2021, and whereas the proposed amendments have been given due consideration by the Board of Supervisors in open session, now therefore be it ordained that Jefferson County Board of Supervisors does hereby amend the official zoning map of Jefferson County as follows, as listed. I move for approval of this ordinance.
I have a second from Mr. Paulson. Questions, discussions? Go ahead. Supervisor Renard.
I have a question on the 4th item down on the page 7. I just happened to have been Zooming the meeting of the zoning committee where these petitions were discussed, and I thought I heard that the committee had decided that the split at N8658 River Valley Road could not be considered a farm consolidation because the home and the building were built well after 1978, and the split was approved, but it wasn't approved, I don't believe, as a farm consolidation lot. So maybe that just needs to be clarified or something?
I believe you're correct on that. Matt, do you recall?
Yeah, it's not a true farm consolidation, just the term farm consolidation, that's in that instance was used just because it was around an existing building. So incorrect farm consolidation verbiage on our part, but you are correct, Amy.
Thanks. Thank you.
Any other questions? Supervisor Lund?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is about the first item on page 6. It has one condition that must be completed within 2 years and another condition that must be completed within 4 years. Is that then not qualified by the last item on page 8, that zoning amendments shall be null and void and have no effect 1 year from the date of county board approval?
Want to address that one too, Matt?
I'm going to send that to our corporation council. The intent is for the 2-year and the 4-year provisions, not the 1 year in this case, since it's a different type of petition.
Thank you.
That's it. The record will reflect Matt's comments, and that will be the answer. Okay. As written. Any other questions? Supervisor Kennard.
I will abstain for potential conflicts of interest.
Let the record note that. Any other questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the ordinance passes. Ms. Renard.
Okay, that brings us to item number 8C. Supervisor Jacob?
Thank you. Ordinance number 2021-10, amending amending the official zoning map. Whereas Jefferson County Board of Supervisors has heretofore been petitioned to amend parcel of property in the official zoning map of Jefferson County from A3 agricultural and rural residential to A2 agricultural and rural business. And whereas petition number 4288A-21 was referred to the Jefferson County Planning and Zoning Committee for public hearing on December 17, 2021, and January 21st, 2021, and August 19, 2021. And whereas the Planning and Zoning Committee referred a resolution to the county board denying petition R4288-21, and whereas Jefferson County Board of Supervisors considered resolution 2021-36 denying petition R4288A-21 at its September meeting on September 14, 2021, which failed to pass by a 24-5 majority vote. And whereas Jefferson County Board of Supervisors then directed Planning and Zoning Committee to draft an ordinance amending the official zoning map from A3 to A2 as requested in petition R4288-21. And whereas the proposed amendment requested in petition R4288A-21 has been given due consideration by the County Board of Supervisors in open session. Now therefore be it ordained that Jefferson County Board of Supervisors hereby amends the official zoning map of Jefferson County as followed. Rezoning pin number as listed at N7040 Saucer Drive in the town of Farmington. This in accordance with section 1104 F7 of the Jefferson County Ordinance. This action is conditioned upon receipt of zoning of a plat of survey indicating the A2 location at R4288A-20, Diane Owens and Paul Elliott. The above zoning amendments shall be null and void and have no effect 1 year from the date of the county board approval unless applicable conditions have been completed. I move for approval of this ordinance.
Second by Supervisor Paulson. Are there any questions or comment? Supervisor Jacob.
Thank you, Chair. The zoning committee has performed the administrative duty as charged by the board's action to return the petition in the affirmative, with the reaffirmation of the committee that the petition presented be denied with a 3-1 vote, with Supervisor Felker being absent, excused from the meeting. The committee, having performed this duty to properly review the rezoning application using standard policy and procedure as prescribed by law and custom, the committee, via site inspection tour, visited the property twice, with the findings of facts reviewed by all committee members and avoided any contact with the petitioner during these inspections. Public hearings on the petition were held twice, with those for and against the petition being heard and the findings of fact read into the minutes at the hearing. The petitions voluntarily withdrew their petition after the first public hearing before the committee's decision meeting. Thus, no action was taken by the committee. The petitioner reapplied this, triggering the same process, accumulating in the committee's review of their observations during site inspections. The public hearing testimony, review of the findings of facts, and came to the decision to deny the rezone by a 5-0 vote. The conditional use was not taken up because this conditional use application becomes superfluous with the rezone denial. The committee felt the petition did not meet the guidelines of the Jefferson County Comprehensive Plan reflected by the Jefferson County Ordinance, both which were approved by the County Board unanimously in 2021. We as a committee, again, at the most recent meeting, employed due diligence by reviewing the testimony, findings of fact, and applying zoning ordinance. Again, recommend denial. We strongly advise the board to reverse its prior action to avoid violating established policy and procedure. The board approved the ordinance in essence, possibly compromising the committee's system. The proper remedy in a situation like this is text amendment to the zoning ordinance and possibly comprehensive plan. The prescribed process entails drafting amendments, public hearing on the changes, with subsequent approval by committee, the county board, and 9 of the 16 Jefferson County townships. The petitioners then can apply under the new revised ordinance. I would ask the new ordinance. I would ask the chair to recognize Supervisor Nass, Vice Chair of the Planning and Zoning Committee, for further comment.
I think Supervisor Nass had his hand up. Go ahead, Steve.
Again, the committee strongly suggests the board not take this action for these reasons. 1, the rezone to A2 does not allow the petitioners to begin operating. They still require a conditional use permit to be granted by the committee, and there is no conditional use available under the A2 zone for this type of operation. Thus, the board would be creating an A2 zone with no use. 2, we feel the board is contemplating a rezoning action without following due process. A, the board has conducted no public hearing to hear all views with unlimited comment for those for and opposed with rebuttals, all recorded as part of the public record. B, the board has not reviewed the findings of fact in this petition. C, the board is essentially ignoring its own zoning ordinance and possibly its comprehensive plan. D, several board members may have had conversations or communications with the petitioners that are not part of the public record, although not illegal, in our opinion, is a bit unethical. E, the board has not availed itself of the remedy using the lawfully prescribed amendment process. 3, if this action is appealed to district court, we feel if the committee is called as witnesses, we would be obliged to testify in opposition to our own county board for the above listed reasons. And in our opinion, the board could quite possibly lose this case. The board could possibly be sending their corporate counsel into a gunfight with a wet noodle. 4, we have been founded as a nation of laws, and we have taken an oath to uphold those laws. We live in a democratic republic where if we don't like the law, or the law isn't working for us, we can change it through an open democratic process. This contemplated board action skirts the law, the process, our committee system, and our opinion is a significant error on the part of the board. We feel it is our duty as a committee, and mine as the board chair, to point this out and protect the board from itself. What next? Fixing traffic tickets without knowing the facts, without hearing the arresting officer's statements, ignoring the advice of the law enforcement committee or the sheriff, or board members submitting their own budgets using their own accounting method after only talking to 2 or 3 department heads and ignoring the comprehensive work of the finance committee and the chief financial officer? I hope not. That's anarchy. That's anarchy. We do suggest and support an educational session in the future to give the board a better understanding and overview of the zoning process. Lastly, I've always appreciated the sage advice given several times by our former corporate counsel, Phil Risto. when the board would begin to wander into uncharted wilderness. And his quote is, "The board certainly has the right to do whatever it wants, but I suggest you bring your checkbook. Enjoy your retirement, Phil. Hope you're smiling." Thank you.
Anybody else? Supervisor Smith?
I supported this a week ago and I still support it because what I'm hearing is a lot of nothing. That to think that the neighbors somehow control what goes on in the property around them. Clearly you haven't been at our other meetings where we put in a 12 million gallon liquid natural gas tank. You weren't here when we put a new highway around the city of Watertown. You know, we just rezoned some houses in maybe it was Palmyra where it was zoned industrial, and they could have put in lockers, you know, rental lockers, and instead we rezoned it 3 lots that nobody really wanted. You know, we have up north family property where a gun range went in next to us, and we listened to, you know, it didn't matter whether you'd slept at night or whatever. You know, you have neighbors, you have to live with your neighbors. You know, the roads people are going to drive on, there's noise at night. You know, life is going to change. And as we look at the economics of Jefferson County, if you're not in Exonia, Johnson Creek, or Lake Mills, they're literally half the growth in this county. You know, the city of Watertown, there's a mass exodus of it. The city of Jefferson has more growth than the city of Watertown. You know, I don't know if I lived next to this place that I would be opposing this. You know, they're going to be done by 10 o'clock. You say that talking about 2 acres of farmland, we just approved a barn on 1.3 acres. You know, if this was a barn, would there be the opposition to this? You know, I haven't heard anything about anybody with a barn who can have weddings, that there's been any problem with traffic or police or anything. That I just don't see what the problem is. That, you know, we need the economic development. They're not going to do catering. They're not going to supply their own flowers. I've got to believe this is all inside. There's not going to be music outside. That, you know, and as far as zoning goes, look at every time it changes, there's a date there. Zoning is fluid. We do not have a place for this in our zoning. And yes, we should have meetings where we do change it. That, you know, to say that it is agricultural, I wouldn't really want to argue that it is. That, you know, if you look out the window, you can see a farm. You know, that's a ridiculous argument. But at the same point, when you have a wedding in a barn and you argue that you can see the barn from the inside, that's somehow agricultural tourism, you know, that's a ridiculous argument too. So, you know, I'm sorry to the neighbors that I'm going to support this. You know, you're going to have to live with it. And I just don't see it's going to be the problem that you believe it is.
Supervisor Martin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tonight it's been inferred or stated that there was misinformation about the distance from the other residences, and I'd like clarification on that. And I'd also like clarification as to whether that was misstated in any of the application materials. And then also it was stated, what else? That it is not, that it was previously said that one could not see this at all from any of the nearby neighbors' homes. And I would like clarification on whether or not that's true and whether that was stated in any of the permit materials, because for me it's a problem if things have been misstated in permit materials. I do have some concerns about whether it's a wedding barn or a wedding castle or a wedding this or a wedding that. And it is very complicated. I do think, however, we need to make sure that the materials are factual. Thank you.
Mr. Zango, can you provide some clarification on that?
In regards to the comments about the residents, I believe the neighbor was referencing the previous county board meeting where a county board supervisor referenced the lack of adjoining residents nearby the proposed site. That is incorrect. There's one residential house very close to the property, very close to the castle itself. And then there's two vacant residential properties that have yet to be built on. So that was, I think, the miscommunication on that part. They were not referenced in the application from the actual petitioner incorrectly.
Thank you. Supervisor Christensen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So tonight we've got ordinance number 10, and I'm going to vote yes for this ordinance. And I support what we did last month in voting no on the denial. I think that the zoning change and the proposed use that we've heard from Elliott and Owens does have merit. It does not impact ag land in a negative way or open space because it repurposes an existing structure. It fits in with the comprehensive plan. I'll get back to that. I think that the objections lack evidence and seriousness for the most part. And I understand that the objector is an absentee owner, that the nearest neighbors nearby are renters, and I said this last month that they were not opposed to it. So all of the renters that we know about are not opposed to it. A recent sale of land did not show to me that it was a decreased property values. I think those objections, they're probably valid concerns, but I don't think they're actual a problem for the from a financial aspect. From my observation, almost all of the rezones and conditional use requests need some rule bending or other forgiveness by the committee to get to approval. At the last meeting that I attended on Zoom, and Supervisor Renard mentioned that meeting, almost every one of those petitions needed some pushing around in order to make them fit. One was the house and the split that Renard mentioned that wasn't prior to, the building was not built prior to 78, but it was allowed to go through anyway. After a little discussion, it moved on through. Other things that we saw were like a similar rezone and conditional use from A3 or from A to A2 anyway. And there was a storage component, but it was for construction concrete services. And Supervisor Nass stated in that zoning committee that it doesn't mean that there's going to be concrete trucks coming and going. Well, okay, you know, a concrete mixing truck is not going to come and go, but there's going to be numerous trucks coming and going every morning and every night. That was not stated, it wasn't mentioned. Those kind of things where the negative effects of some of these decisions are minimized, did not occur with this Owens and Elliott proposal, where the negatives were always mentioned in the highest, at the highest level. 50 people, a lot of cars, but that's not what their proposal or their business plan was stated to be. It was going to be 10 to 15 people most of the time, but they could have as many as 50. I don't think that ag tourism is, well, I shouldn't say that. I think that ag tourism is a valid conditional use, and it's valid because it's not defined. Our Corporation Counsel mentioned that to me, and because it's not defined, I think that it could be applied in this case. The lopsided vote from last month was a bit of a surprise to me. I didn't think it would succeed, the no votes would succeed last month. I thought maybe we'd get close to 50-50, but we ended up with 24-5. It might have been 25-5. There was one person missing, but that tells me that crowd intelligence saw that there is a problem with our zoning ordinance that needs some repair. There's a glitch, and it was obvious to people. It doesn't mean that any individual or the department or the zoning committee is being criticized. They did their job the best they could see, but I think that there is merit to this proposal, and it should proceed and get a conditional use. And then, after that, I think this body should work, roll up our sleeves, and find a way to make this a permanent positive action in our zoning committee, or zoning ordinance. I guess that's what I've got. Thanks.
Supervisor Roberts has her hand up on Zoom. Mary, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. I did tour the castle, and I did notice the one property that was right up against it, and that was brought up in our meeting last month, and that those people agreed that it was okay. I think a misconception is that you're calling it a wedding venue and thinking that, oh, weddings are huge. Well, I toured it. You would not have a large wedding there. Because it's very small, and it's not just for weddings. They wanted corporal meetings there and other small venues that would fit their plan. So the plan wasn't to have 150 people there outside with music. In fact, when I was there, I saw an area and I said, are you going to put a gazebo out there for weddings? And they said, no, because we're not going to do outside venues. It's all indoors and it's all small groups. The building would not handle a large group. As Christensen said, 50 would be the most, and I wouldn't even think I'd want 50 there. So I think the misconception is thinking of it as a wedding venue, people drinking, going crazy. No, it's not going to be like that. Thank you for listening.
Anybody else? Supervisor Schultz.
Yes, I'd like to get a clarification. In the ordinance at the bottom, it says the above zoning amendment shall be null and void and have no effect 1 year from the date of the county board approval unless all applicable conditions have been completed. Is that the same as a sunset provision, where basically we review it a year from now, and if we discovered that they have weddings of 200 people and their cars all over the roads and a mess, is that what this is? Or is that something we can add to this, kind of a sunset where we review it in a year?
Mr. Ward, do you want to clarify that? Does that have to do with the conditional use permit conditions?
That's a conditional use permit condition that would need to be addressed. The reference to the final paragraph on the proposed ordinance referencing all conditions being met is referencing the paragraph above it, which says this action is conditioned upon receipt by zoning of a plat of survey indicating the A2 zone location. And then it references the party's name. So that's the condition that must be met.
It's just the plat of survey?
Yes.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Supervisor Schultz?
Yes. My other part of my question is, how do we add a sunset provision where the zoning committee reviews, have they in fact lived up to what they promised when we approved the zoning change?
Like a trial period?
Basically. I don't want it to expire in a year, but I want a review in a year to make sure what we've been promised is actually happening.
When you say promise, you're saying what's been promised in the petition by the landowners is how they're going to use the land?
Yes, and that they're not going to have venues, they're not going to have weddings of 200 people, and we end up with cars parked all over the roads, and things that we were promised they were not going to do, or that they were going to do. Just a review to make sure that they have been doing.
If the county board approves a rezoning to A2, that's not going to give the the landowner's permission to do what they want to do. They have to go to the Planning and Zoning Committee and get a conditional use permit. And when the Planning and Zoning Committee considers their petition for a conditional use permit, if granted, it would impose conditions such as how many people can be at the venue, what are the hours, and many, many more conditions, whatever the committee deems appropriate if they find that this use is appropriate for an A2 zoning district. So that's not something the county board would address.
Well, I have a question about that. Oh, what's the enforcement mechanism then on the conditions in a conditional use permit?
If the county planning and zoning committee grants a conditional use permit imposing conditions and the landowner doesn't follow the conditions, then the county planning and zoning committee can revoke the conditional use permit. And if that happens, then the landowners are operating illegally. And that's when Matt comes to my office and says, what can we do?
So there's sort of a hammer there.
There is.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Supervisor Johns.
Yeah, I just had a couple of comments on this, and going back to the comprehensive plan. Part of the comprehensive plan is to encourage entrepreneurships in rural areas, to bring in small businesses, whatever, into the rural areas to build up our economy in those areas and to offer jobs. The other thing is, in the broadband development that we've been gaining on here in the county and certainly working on for the last year and a half or 2 years, part of the reason for that broadband effort is the mandate of that is to develop wireless so that small businesses in the rural areas, whether you're working from your home or a small business, can access the internet in a better way. So I think that this fits into a small rural business, and I do understand the neighbors. I live in a rural street and a rural road, and the only noise I hear is traffic going up and down the road once in a while, and that's about it. But at the same time, this particular thing is very unusual, and it offers something for the county that isn't available right now. And in looking at the ways that this thing would be used, I am sure that the neighbors won't even know what's going on unless there's more than 15 cars there. Most of the time, I think it's going to be smaller, and then certainly there might be a wedding here and there. There might be one a month, but again, they're held down to a very small size. And most of those small size weddings are for older couples and couples that really aren't planning on having a huge party. So again, with everything being indoors, there won't be any music outdoors, and there will be most of the time less than 25 cars, maybe 20. I don't see that this is very much of an imposition on the neighbors, especially the fact that the castle itself is unseen from pretty much any direction. So it's back, 1,000 feet off the road or 800 feet, whatever it is, and most of the time nobody will know what's going on. It's just going to be a quiet get together. So that's what I will be voting in a positive way for this.
Anybody else wish to speak? Oh, Supervisor Payne.
Yes, I have a question, basically clarification. It was touched on already that recently there was another site in Palmyra on County Road H, and they were requesting rezoning to A2 to use an older building for an event planning as well. And the reasons and the conclusion that complies, it says this is a good reuse of an old site. So my question is, why is this different? This is hours of operation is Friday, Saturday, 10 a.m. to 12 a.m., Sunday, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. Looking on Google, if I have the location correct, there are a lot of neighbors right around there. It is an older building. It isn't a barn. It was rezoned to A2. So my question is, can it be clarified why this is acceptable and the castle is not? Thank you.
Supervisor Jaco, want to take a crack at that?
Well, yes, I will. That site in Palmyra was actually an industrial site. It's an old industrial building on, correct me, Mr. Paulson, I think it's 40 acres or over 20 acres for sure. 18? Okay, John. You know, it was a very large old site. There is lots and lots of parking for vehicles to be there. It's on a major county road. It's not on a little town road. The only neighbors we had that came and, how do you want to say, opposed it were people from the DNR with the forest that don't live there, don't live anywhere near the forest or joining the property. And they actually didn't oppose the event center. They only opposed the residential building sites that we as a committee thought was a nice buffer to an industrial site, or that instead of having industrial buildings built right up to the edge, which is very possible for that gentleman to do yet. He hasn't, I don't think, fully gone through with the permitting. So yeah, that's why that site fits the program better than this, because it was not going from A3, it was going from industrial. So that's why we agreed on that one.
I do have a question then.
Yeah.
So am I to understand that that A2 uses are variable depending on what the site was to begin with? So A2 isn't always the same as, you know, for each additional site? I guess I don't understand that reasoning for this. It just seems to me that the same idea, but somehow, which I'm not really opposed to, that we were trying to fit something in to do better for the community, to do better for business. And I would say that the castle is doing the same thing, that we're trying to fit something in. There are a lot of A2 conditional use permits, uses allowed that would be probably more obtrusive to the neighbors, such as a campground, a gun shooting area. So I guess it's the same thing that applies, is that you're trying to fit something into the community in a building that otherwise might sit there and not be used. So I guess, you know, that's how I'm looking at this. Thank you.
Supervisor Kelly?
Thank you. I think I voted it with the majority in the previous meeting. But after hearing Supervisor Jaco and Nas explain the situation at the zoning department in the law, I'm going to vote against this at this time. I think it's a good idea, and I think I'm supportive of what they want to do, but we should do it the right way, as was discussed, and you know, change our land use plan accordingly if that's what it takes. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Supervisor Christensen?
Yeah, I just wanted to return to the comprehensive plan because it's been mentioned several times, and it does have a number of items in it that refer pretty closely to what we're talking about, the tourism economy in Chapter 2. Sorry, county identity and marketing. And then down at the bottom of page 210, it talks about supporting existing businesses and attracting new industries. And the sentence that I refer to is new industry opportunities could include support for entrepreneurship and introduction of new industries that expand the offerings. On another page, it talks about encouraging infill, redevelopment, and reuse of properties, which this proposal does. On the page of 513, it talks about ensure clarity and legibility of planning documents. I think what we have here is an opportunity to move forward in the next year or so after an approval of this tonight and a successful finding of conditional use that would apply to this. I think there's an opportunity to improve on what we've already got as a pretty good zoning ordinance. I don't think we're looking at a situation where the sky is falling. We aren't going to go off the deep end on this. It's a pretty narrow set of conditions and strictures that we can apply to this. On page 4.3 under visions and goals, provide resources and education to help promote existing business growth and ensure the success of entrepreneurs in the county. I think that's another obvious indication that entrepreneurs, such as this proposal is presented by entrepreneurs, is important. There's two more that I won't about entrepreneurs, but number 6 on page 4.4 talks about carefully plan for siting of development to protect agricultural, natural, and cultural resources within the county. Now, it may be possible that Owens and Elliott could go buy some property elsewhere and build a building and make a venue out of that, but they would be using new built-on property. Whereas here, they're converting a building that would fallen into disrepair into a usable space. And then finally, in the Jefferson County Agricultural Preservation Land Use Plan, under, oh, wait a minute here, maybe that's not the right one. Nope, I highlighted the wrong one. But anyway, I'll stop there. But I do think that from what Supervisor Kelly mentioned, this does not go against our plan because ag tourism is not defined. And so it's an opportunity, which we've already seen a lot of subjectivity in the decision-making by the committee and the board in general. You can apply some of that subjectivity to define ag tourism in a way that would help this along. And then in the future, we could refine that from there. Thanks for your time.
Supervisor Nealon had his hand up.
I'll be voting against this. Can you hear me? But my reasoning is that we have zoning for a reason, and when you look at it globally, we have commercial areas surrounding towns that people have invested in. We've got entertainment venues in those locations. This type of purpose is being served by those venues and by those people who have invested in those venues. And I think that we are taking away their ability to cater to the public by allowing this type of purpose to happen outside in the countryside. I think that the exclusion that allows barns to be able to do this in itself is an exception to the rule that has been brought about by the state imposing their will on us. So I kind of think that the commercial uses should be reserved and tightened down to the commercial designated spaces for those uses. I think that this is an example of spot zoning. I have been out there and looked at the property, and I think that if it was agricultural and it was something that was allowed by the state law as an exception, it would be one thing, but I don't think it's that at all. When you allow a barn to host a wedding, you're not creating a commercial building that has air conditioning and heating and all of that kind of stuff. So I think it's the intent of the law is not something that would be applicable in this case.
Supervisor Naz. And then Paulson.
Few items of clarification here. Some of the discussion here has been apples and oranges. First of all, the concrete businesses are allowed CU use in an A2 zone. They're already listed in their concrete and construction. The difficulty with this isn't specifically listed in there. Doesn't mean it can't, but there's a process to go through for this. Remember, we're not ogres on this committee finding some way to deny things to people. That's not the point here. We just want the procedure to be followed and not have zoning undermined. I already got a phone call from a pork producer who basically said to me, if this passes, does that mean I'll be able to move part of my hog operation into a residential district? I said, good question. Good question. Just appeal to the board, I guess. But we wouldn't, there is a process to deal with this, and that's what we're asking us to look at. I've heard the LNG plant come up several times here. That's completely unrelated. It wasn't even a rezone. It's an A1, utilities and are allowed use in the A1, but with a conditional use, which the committee granted, We Energies a conditional use, with the caveat that they enter into a JDA with us. And that's what, if you recall, what we dealt with here on the board was the joint development agreement. The reason that happens is that it's essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, Blair, but it's a type of contract, basically. And we cannot enter, as a zoning committee, into a contract without the board, outside the board. Only the board can do that. We can't do it on behalf of the board. So that's why that came to you. Conditional uses do not come to this board. And that's the difficulty that we have with this, is that we cannot really see how this meets ag tourism. That's our difficulty. Again, that can be changed if this board wants to, but let's follow the proper procedure. And lastly, we just approved this 2021, but of course, as mentioned here, it is an unusual situation, and thus unforeseeable. We didn't know this when we approved this. We approved the zoning ordinance a while back. So it isn't that we are opposed to the business plan or anything. That doesn't enter into our decision here. That part of the business plan at all, that comes under the conditional use portion that strictly the committee does. So I just want to make sure people are clarified to this. And again, having heard some of the questions that came up here, particularly from my esteemed next door neighbor here from Oakland, that there definitely is a need for an educational component for this board to better understand the zoning process and how it works, and that we can't undermine the zoning law and carve out special dispensations to people, because that's what undermines a zoning ordinance. So thus, it's not that we turn them away. It's not that we don't want to encourage rural businesses. We've approved dozens of rural businesses over the years here, and hundreds of conditional uses. But the point is that we follow the procedure, and I think that's what's important here. That's my concern, is that we aren't following the procedure. Thank you.
Supervisor Paulson, did you have your hand up? No. Okay. Anybody else wish to speak? Supervisor Smith, yeah.
I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We certainly need to change our zoning and to add something like this into it, but this has gone on for years, and to think that now we're going to kick the ball down the road and say now we can go back and do it the way it should have been done, years ago, when we told them that what they should apply for is agricultural tourism. And then they get to this point, we tell them, oh, it doesn't apply. Now we're going to have to change everything. That, to me, how much longer does this need to go on? That if this were a barn, would we be spending our time talking about this? It would have already been approved, because I'd certainly like to know what conditions were put on that barn that was approved with 1.38 acres. Do they have to be done at 10 o'clock at night? And, how many parking cars do they have, and how big a crowd are they allowed? I don't know the answers to those, but again, I think this is a lot about nothing. And I have complete faith in zoning that they're going to put conditional uses on this building as to what they said they are going to do is what they are going to do. And that there will be some kind of clause in there that it will be judged in a year from now that they are abiding by what they agreed to. Thank you.
Okay. Supervisor Kennard.
Yeah, I'm a land surveyor, so I've dealt with the zoning office for years and years and years, and done quite a few of these. I didn't have anything to do with this application, but other applications for A2 zones for all kinds of cabinet shops and you name it. And our A2 zone, I think, was really created, and most of the uses and conditional uses were put together back in the 75, and there's been a few tweaks throughout the years. but I don't think we ever envisioned things like this would ever come around. And now we have it. As the world evolves, I guess we're gonna maybe come up with some other new things that we have never dealt with before. So I agree that the proper way to do it is to put it back, change the ordinance, get the towns to buy in on it. I guess that's how the ordinance gets changed. You know, and in the future, hopefully this would be a whole lot simpler process. So I'm still thinking of whether I'm going to vote for or no.
Supervisor Lund has his hand up on Zoom.
Thank you, Madam
Go ahead,
Chair.
Kurt.
I have a question of clarification. If the county board votes to allow this zoning change tonight, and then the committee, the Planning and Zoning Committee, considers whether or not to grant a conditional use permit and what conditions to put on the granting or denial of that permit, is our vote here tonight as a full county board potentially moot? Because the committee could just deny conditional use permit, and then the rezoning would, you know, would not allow them to do what they want to do without the conditional use permit. So I'd like that clarified, please. That's my point.
That's correct. If the county board rezones to A2 as requested, that really is one step in the process. And from what I can tell, it's the smallest step in the process, because the big hurdle then would be getting approval from the Planning and Zoning Committee. First of all, determining whether or not the proposed use fits in with a conditional use, agricultural tourism. And the reason we're here today is because at some point and at some level, the Planning and Zoning Committee recommended denial of the rezoning because they didn't feel that this use was within the definition of agricultural tourism. So a rezone tonight doesn't assure the owners of the property the use that they are seeking in the petition.
What is the definition of agricultural tourism? I don't see it in the zoning code.
It's not there. It's not defined.
Oh.
It's up to the Planning and Zoning Committee to determine if something is agricultural tourism or not.
All right. Anybody else wish to speak? Having a hard time seeing everybody.
It's not so easy.
No, this thing should be gone. I can't see people. Okay, I guess we're ready to vote then. We'll take a roll call vote on this. Yes to approve the rezoning, no to not approve the rezoning.
Supervisor Herbst?
Yes.
Thank you. Supervisor Roberts?
Yes.
Okay, we have 15 yes, 14 no, and 1 absent.
The motion is passed. 15 yes, 14 no.
Thank you very much, Supervisor. If it is okay with the board here, could we move on to the bond resolution, since we have our consultants here, and so they don't have to listen to the whole budget resolution? Yes, 11A. Could I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
So moved from, you have second from Supervisor Backlund. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. Let's move on to the bond issue. Backward. No, the move was by Winnicky, back to second. So this will be item 11A. Please. You are welcome to stay for the budget hearing. Please come right up to the microphone.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. Good evening. I'm Joe Murray from Ellers, proud to be the county's financial advisor. Today was the first step of the financing plan for the renovations to this building, the ultimate $36 million over the next 3 to 4 years of borrowing as anticipated. I have good news to report, but as part of the process, first off, I guess I should remind everybody, I believe you all have a copy of the sale day report. That's what I'm speaking to. As part of the process for doing a debt issuance, we did go through a rating process with Moody's Investment Services. You should be pleased to know that your AA2 rating was affirmed by Moody's. It's based primarily on your strong financial position. AA2 is the third highest rating. You have AAA, AA1, and AA2. So you're in a very good, strong rating for a county your size. Today we received 5 bids on your behalf. The second place bid came in with 1 basis point, and that's 0.01% of the winning bid to show that they're very tight competition. All of them, all 5 of the bids came within 10 basis points, again to show a lot of interest and competition in your issue, and all of them came well underneath our 1.88 projected true interest cost. The low bid came in from FHN Financial Capital Markets out of Memphis, Tennessee. After we had some adjustments from the bidding, the low bid came in at 1.4712%. As I said, we had projected 1.88. So that's very good. Your sale today is for $8 million, and the net total principal and interest cost is $8,614,018. So it was very good news. Like I said, the low winning bid came in 40 basis points lower than we had projected. The winning bid also was a premium bid. And what that means is that the underwriter pays the county. They offer the investments to their investors with higher coupon interest rates because it's easier for them to sell. People are concerned about inflation risk. In return for that and being able to sell it, an underwriter then provides cash to the county to help pay down those interest costs. That's why the net interest cost is lower. This provided the county with $385,507 to pay for that additional interest cost. The net impact also allowed based on the way the true interest, the lower bids as well as the premium, it allowed the county to save $87,639 from what we had projected. The net impact of this on your tax rate has also been revised to reflect, and I believe you've already discussed, your higher equalized values than we had projected when we started this process. So the net tax increase in 2022, instead of being a 24-cent increase for debt service is now going to be 23 cents. The impact on a $250,000 equalized value home is now the increase in 2022 will be roughly $57 instead of $60 for next year. The total impact for all of the financing plan based on these good rates today also lowers the impact to that $250,000 home down from $1,207 as what we projected to $1,113. So a savings of $94 is projected for the entire financing plan for all the issues. The original structure also anticipated a discount bid. That's where the underwriter takes their cut or compensation before selling it to their investors. And so since they did a premium bid, that discount was available. We were able to provide an additional $110,830 for project funds associated with this building. So this evening, we're recommending that the county adopt a resolution to sell $8 million of general obligation county building bonds, Series 2021A, FHN Capital Markets at a true interest cost of 1.4712%. And I'd be happy to go through the additional items in the report. It includes the tax impact, the sources and uses. It has a copy of the rating report. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions? Questions? Boy, that was thorough.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joe. I appreciate it. Which takes us to the resolution. I believe it's this sheet, this kind of pale yellow sheet here. That would be Supervisor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I begin, I'd also like to thank elders and Representative Joe Murray for their hard work and for making this bond sale successful and for their guidance on this whole bond issue. Resolution number
37.
2021-37. Resolution awarding the sale of 8 million general obligation county building bonds, Series 2021A. I will not read the whole packet. Thank you. Okay. By popular request now. Whereas on August 10th, 2021, the County Board of Supervisors of Jefferson County, Wisconsin, the county adopted an initial resolution, authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds or promissory notes in the amount not to exceed $36 million for the public purpose of paying the cost of county building projects consisting of the construction of addition to and renovation of the courthouse, sheriff's office, and jail facilities, construction of related improvements, and acquisition of furnishing and equipment, collectively the project. Whereas on September 14, 2021, the County Board of Supervisors of the county adopted a resolution, the set sale resolution, providing that $8 million of general obligation bonds authorized by the initial resolution be issued and sold as a single issue of bonds designated as General Obligation County Building Bonds Series 2021A, the bonds, for the purpose of paying a portion of the cost of the project. Whereas the County Board of Supervisors hereby finds and determines that the project is within the county's power to undertake and therefore serve a public purpose, as that term is defined in section 67.04 sub 1 sub B Wisconsin statutes. Whereas the county is authorized by the provisions of section 67.04 Wisconsin statutes to borrow money and issue general obligation bonds for such public purpose. Whereas none of the proceeds of the bonds shall be used to fund the operating expenses of the general fund of the county or to fund the operating expenses of any special revenue fund of the county that is supported by the property taxes. Whereas pursuant to the said sale resolution, the county has directed Elders and Association, Incorporated, Elders, to take the steps necessary to sell the bonds to pay costs of the project. Whereas Elders is in consultation with the officials of the county, prepare a notice of sale, a copy which is attached hereto as Exhibit A and incorporated herein by this reference, setting forth the details of and the bid requirements for the bonds, and indicating that the bonds would be offered for public sale on October 12, 2021. Whereas the county clerk in consultation with Elders caused the form of notice of the sale to be published and or announced and caused the notice of sale to be distributed to potential bidders for offering the bonds for public sale on October 12, 2021. Whereas the county has duly received bids for the bonds as described on the bid tabulation attached hereto as Exhibit B and incorporated herein by the reference to the bid tabulation.
And whereas it has been determined that the proposal submitted by the financial institutions listed first on the bid tabulation fully complies with the bid requirements set forth in the notice of sale and is deemed to be the most advantageous to the county. Elders has recommended the county accept the proposal. A copy of this proposal submitted by such institutions, the purchaser, is attached as Exhibit C and incorporated herein by this reference. Now therefore be it resolved by the County Board of Supervisors of the county that, I'm going to read the next two sections yet. Section 1, ratification of the notice of sale and offering materials. The County Board of Supervisors hereby ratifies and approves the details of the bonds set forth in Exhibit A attached hereto as and for the details of the bonds. The notice of sale and any other offering materials prepared and circulated by elders are hereby ratified and approved in all respects. All action taken by officers of the county and elders in connection with the preparation and distribution of notice of sale and any other offering materials are hereby ratified and approved in all respects. Section 1A, award of the bonds. For the purpose of paying costs of the project, there shall be borrowed pursuant to Section 67.04 Wisconsin statutes the principal sum of $8 million from the purchaser in according with the terms and conditions of the proposal. The proposal of the purchaser offering to purchase the bonds for the sum set forth on the proposal plus accrued interest to the date of the delivery resulting in a true interest cost as set forth on the proposal is hereby accepted. The chairperson and the county clerk or other appropriate officers of the county are authorized and directed to execute an acceptance of the proposal on behalf of the county. The good faith deposit of the purchaser shall be applied in accordance with the notice of sale, and any good faith deposit submitted by unsuccessful bidders shall be promptly returned. The bond shall bear interest on the rates set forth on the proposal. The rest of the package sort of tells all the legal conditions and the contract agreement between us and the seller. Mr. Chair, I move for passage of this resolution.
Do I have a second? Second by Supervisor Schultz. Discussion. Questions? I think we've been over this quite a bit in the last several months. Questions, discussion? We'll take a roll call vote on this.
Supervisor Herbst,
Yes.
thank you. Supervisor Roberts,
Yes.
we have 27 yes, 1 no, and 2 absent.
Thank you. This takes us back to item number 9, special order of business.
Did you do 6E?
What's that?
Or no, never mind.
We never got to
D.
E. We never got to That's one right after. That was my, yeah.
Well, it's everyone's favorite time of the year. It's budget time. So you got a nice little book in front of you tonight. And as part of the presentation, you also have a copy of the presentation. I have tried to indicate some notes and pages so you can try to go back and look at future dates. We have time to adjust what I think we're up to over 450 some odd pages right now. So to take a look at. So my intent to really hit some of the highlights and try to be somewhat efficient as we move forward tonight. And so when we presented to the Finance Committee, I posed some questions as we thought as staff how we like to prepare the budget. And I kind of want to share these ideas with you so you kind of have some ideas of the philosophy and thoughts we've had as we prepare this budget and to look ahead. So first is right up front is that the idea is this is that biggest policy decision you make on an annual basis. It drives so many things that we do on a day-to-day basis and carry out the functions and needs of the county
in the long term. And it's time, talent, and resources is what we try to look at. And that's really what makes some of these things move forward. And so as we look at the budget, we always ask some of these questions, whether it's directly or just quite honestly in conversations. And part of it is, why do we do the work that we do? And in some cases, why don't we do certain work? Who do we serve? Tonight we had a group we serve in multiple ways, and we can go through all the functionalities and the various programs that we do, but we have a very diverse operation in the functions that who we serve, and it changes by department. How do we serve? We can look at outcomes, but there's a process how we do it. It's how we approach as a customer base, how we look at planning processes, how do we take input, and how do we work as a team? What's changed? What hasn't changed in the last 2 years as we look at the impacts of COVID and the economy and other things that impact us on a day-to-day basis, and how we get into the budget in a position to react to those changes. What are the trends? This morning, Human Services Board met, and every division gives an update of where they're at. And I think for many of you in this room, you would not be surprised to hear our mental health cases continue to go at a rate higher than previous years. What are those trends that we need to be prepared for to react to as a county? From a board standpoint, what are those outcomes you wish us to achieve? And how do we get there? And who do we want to be? There's some of that conversation that came up in the debate that we had just now. So part of this is a policy question, because we also have some great staff that can develop a business plan to help achieve those outcomes together. So just something to look at. So I talk with teams sometimes about local government is really a team sport, especially as you look at an organization that has challenges, is how do we work together? And today there's just a reminder that, again, as the Human Services Board had a conversation about crisis intervention training, or CIT, with law enforcement. As a presentation, you should all hear of how our human services and our law enforcement community, our deputies, and all our cities work together. We have had over 300 people receive CIT training of how to look at de-escalation techniques and a whole lot of litany of other things that we do. That is how we work together to look at achieving complex problems. And we can go through a litany. The Finance Committee had almost 15 hours, roughly, of meetings to hear about the budget, and a couple of board members who sat along with that. And so I'm not going to go 15 hours to recreate what they went through. But I think the one thing I do want to highlight is this year we had some very great dialogue that took place in terms of where we're at, where we hope to go, and some of the challenges, but a lot of great opportunities that are built into this budget to move ahead. And the last thing I just want to remind folks is this is always a year-long process. It's just not just start tonight. I think part of it is that constructive dialogue we have throughout the years. We look at priorities, programs, and needs throughout all our departments to serve the public. So last year we talked about this being a budget in transition because of everything that was going on. But the reality is where we're at today, it's a budget transition plus. It's a budget that talks about recovery. And it's a budget that really focuses on how do we implement and execute some of our strategic initiatives going forward. We have economic impacts we have to look at. We need to ensure that we have flexibility, sustainability of what we built into the budget, both internally and externally. You will see some department changes that are in this budget. We're still going to be dealing with COVID-19, and we need to remain vigilant, but we also look at recovery and how do we move things forward too. In many cases, we've already done that. Talk a lot about those trends, plans, and impacts. So one thing we are recommending as we come off the comprehensive plan being updated, and some of the work the staff is doing, is we do update the strategic plan to look at the next 3 years of action steps. We need to continue to look at structure and needed skill sets and capacity within our departments. The Finance Committee heard from almost every department looking at needs in terms of capacity and skill sets so they can achieve their goals to carry their functions forward. But we also want to look at being a backstop and the backstop for the fiscal conditions of the county. And within this budget, there are several things in there we built to protect the county in case we have some economic downturns, some fund balances, reserves that we'll talk through here in a little bit. And I think the other thing I just want to highlight is our process. And a lot of it looks at the planning processes the board provides us and how do we execute. And recently there's an article by a member of the UW Extension in WCA magazine, and it talked about the counties that use the strategic planning process to get input by residents and stakeholders. And there's a total of 12 they identified, and we get to be one of them. But I think that's a very good company to be in as we look at our process of how we do it. It's not just done in a silo, it's done with input from folks across the county. So the next few slides just look at some of the processes coming ahead and how this is all building. So this is a slide that's going to change, but our staff is towards the end of looking at how do we develop an execution plan of our implementation strategy of the comp plan. So we're up to about 73 tasks that are priorities, I think, in the next 3 years plus. They're going to change a little bit based on some feedback we've gotten, but these are the categories that are breaking down into, and some of these are feedbacks that we're using as we begin to build these budgets. And so in essence, what we're trying to look at is developing this cycle of how do we use these documents in our budget and how do we execute this as staff. So we just completed our comprehensive plan, which is really that 10-year vision of where we're heading. Our next step is update the strategic plan to really look at that 3 to 5 year outlook and break it down to actionable items. Then our next step is everyone's here on staff, and that's to update our priority-based budgeting scenarios so we can look at how those new ideas may align with the total programs that we have. And then it evolves into our annual budget process. It's just a cycle. And the last thing, though, is a continuous monitoring of what we do. How are those outcomes occurring, and how does it build into our evaluations of our team to make sure we're executing what the board asks us to do? So you've seen this slide before, and I bring it back up because of the blue, that fourth wave that's always been talked about. But I bring this forward because this is that emerging trend that we continue to talk about. And those are those areas of psychic trauma, mental illness, economic injury, and burnout. That's internal to our organization, and it's also external to our folks that we serve. And so as we look at some of the things that are built into this budget, it's looking at addressing some of those issues that we are looking at for the future as well to respond to those immediate needs. So current economic conditions that we're seeing, and some of these are going to be a little bit repetitive. So first of all, sales tax. So when we sat in this room last year, the numbers did not look great at all. We were looking at, even in June or July of last year, we were looking at 10% plus reductions in sales tax we're going to take in. The great thing is that did not happen. In fact, we hit our budget plus, and we're well exceeding our budget for 2021. Our last month that we received in September data is probably our highest month that we've ever had as a county for sales tax. We expect those positive trends to continue right now, but we're still being cautiously optimistic as we look at things that are coming forward. It's all in the news about fuel cost. Look at the natural gas costs that are being projected. That's all going to impact discretionary spending, which impacts sales tax. Investment revenue, we've talked about this quite a bit already. Our investment that we can invest in with our fund balance is really tied to the federal interest rates. And as you saw, they're really low. What that means is what was about 2 years ago, $1 million in revenue streams coming down is about $400,000 right now. The way we have structured how we are handling investments is for a quick turnaround. So as soon as we begin to see upticks in interest rates, we're poised to take advantage of that. So we're going to take a little bit of a loss, but we have that buffered right now. But we're ready when interest rates come back to what normal might be. State share revenue really has not changed too much. It's staying fairly flat. We are seeing an increase in our personal property tax, and that's mainly because of the state law change to help replace it entirely. One of the other positives that we're seeing is 3 of our more successful cities in the county, 2 in Johnson Creek and 1 in Whitewater. Their councils have taken action for those to officially end, which means we are going to have some significant increment that will be added going into our 2023 budget cycle, which from a mill rate continues to diversify and expand that growth of what can be taxed in general that was not there before. And then Joe talked a lot about our AA2 rating. I encourage you to take a read of that report. There's some very positive things in there. But many of the things that are challenges are things that we identify in our planning processes to look forward to make action steps. And then other unknowns. If you didn't know, we have elections next year at the state and federal level, and there's a lot of unset policy that could impact the county going forward. We talked about the federal interest rates already. The uncertainty of the labor markets on employment, not only to us as an employer, but what does it mean as we look at economic development and maintaining our own businesses within the county? And we talked a little bit about discretionary spending and what is the federal government going to do with the various potential bills that are coming down. So At the beginning of your book, you'll see the index, and we're not going to go belabor this too much. The one thing I did want to quick highlight is under the fee schedule towards pages 95 to 110, you will see the list by blue and stars of what is being proposed to be changed. So when you look at that, just look for the star and blue lettering, and you'll know what's being proposed to be changed in the fee schedule. Also, just more, if you really want to know what's going on in the county, take a look at our county profiles. So there's a whole lot of data in the first 9 to 10 pages that really give you a lot of information by municipality, by taxable property, and a whole lot of data if you really are excited about that kind of stuff. But it's a really good look back and projection of where we're going ahead as a county. As a reminder, since we do have some new board members, as you look at each department, they're all laid out very similar with some very common items within there to include department mission, department goals, and how they're tied to our strategic plan and our goals, performance evaluations or measurements, factors that might influence how we deliver service. And then you'll look at things like the organizational charts, summary, property tax graph, and their total staffing. The one note that you'll start to see this year in the budget is certain departments are being allocated American Rescue Plan Act dollars, or ARPA. And so you're going to see some blips within certain departments as an example. And that's related to the ARPA dollars that we have already allocated as part of the budget proposal. And then the budget summaries, which we're going to briefly talk through, 64 to 70 is really that 10,000 foot view of the countywide budget. It's broken up by departments, by functions, etc., and classifications. So that's where you should look and really spend some time. So overall, we're looking at a total budget that's going to be over $101 million. That is up, but the main reason is we have multiple one-time capital projects going on, such as the courthouse project. We also have put in here as you look at flood mitigation properties, interurban trail, and some other major capital expenditures that kind of increase it for this time. That's what we're going to be looking at like for the next few years as we execute those bigger budgets or projects, and then we'll start to see that probably come down a little bit as we go to the future. The ultimate bottom line in the county-wide mill rate is right here at the bottom. So our operational mill rate is dropping close to 0.20 or in total. So that's a positive as we look ahead for our operational mill rate. But it is being replaced with the increase in debt, and so you can kind of see almost stagnant mill rates for this upcoming year. There's a slight 1.11% increase, or about 0.05, or just actually a little bit less than 0.05 increase in total of that mill rate. And so we expect that mill rate to continue to go down in future years as we expand our growth, and some of the interest rates continue to go down. But that's where we're at entirely for the budget that's being proposed. Another way to look at the mill rates in a comparison of the last 10 years. The one thing that we are seeing a significant increase in our EAV. In the last few years, we've seen 5 and 6.79% as this year. As noted in our Moody's call, that 6.79% is one of the strongest in the state. So again, it gives some good indications of where the county is heading in terms of economic stature. And then we have two non-countywide graphs to quickly show. One relates to the health department. So we are showing a slight increase in the actual dollars going to the health department in terms of actual property tax, but their mill rate is going down, and that's an overall mill rate reduction of about 5.15%. The other non-countywide mill rate is the library mill rate. This incorporates a formula change that has been approved by the library board and this body. And that shows a slight reduction of levy charge, about $981, and an overall reduction in the mill rate of 5.82%. If you look at page 111, that is really the big chart that talks about more of a bigger countywide mill rate. We have already talked about sales tax and our projections of what that looks like. We still feel that is somewhat conservative, but we want to be cautious of potential economic turns that could impact that going forward. There is a lawsuit in Brown County related to the use of sales tax that is going to be argued in front of the Wisconsin Supreme Court shortly. We'll continue to monitor what does that look like and if there's impact related to use of sales tax by county governments, and what does that mean for maybe potentially budget narratives. Our net new construction is up over $99 million, or 1.27%. What that allows us for is capturing about $344,000 of new property tax. That is primarily built into our capital projects as entirely, but there's some flexibility there. Again, we already talked about the state share revenue and personal property in general. Our utility tax is slightly down, but we'll continue to monitor as we look at the example of the solar farms coming online and when that we can capture new revenue streams related to that utility tax. The one other note that's actually in our treasurer's page relates to interest on property tax. For those who are unaware, when we foreclose on properties and work through that process of delayed property tax being paid, it's a 12% interest rate by statute. So in the past, that number has been almost approaching 7 figures of interest rates that will come back to the county. So this is actually, we've talked before, as this number goes down, is a positive thing, because that means we have people who are able to pay their taxes. It's timely and they can afford to do it. When you start adding up over 3 years of 12% interest rates, folks, it's going to be really tough for folks to catch up to that. And so I think the Finance Committee has worked through that very hard the last several years, and this is a number that shows for that. On page 83, you begin to look at our fund balance, or our balance sheet of where we're at. We continue to grow our fund balance in very positive ways entirely. And as we ended at the end of last year, as presented by the auditors, is over $37 million is in our fund balance. Some of that is planned fund balance use for this year. So although it ended as a fund balance, we're planning to use it in the next couple of years in specific projects. As you look at these top several line items, these are really items that are liabilities that we're reserving. As Supervisor Jones likes to say, we have our buckets reserved to protect the county. And so this includes things such as vested benefits. We also have what's called IBNR. This is incurred but not recorded potential litigation that's done through an actuarial analysis WMIC. We have changed the last 2 years how we handle that, and I have reserved the entire IBNR, which we feel is a very sound policy to protect the county for potential any liabilities. Right now that number is over $880,000. As we go down, we begin to look at our operational expenditures to maintain that 3-month fund balance policy. And that is, we need to keep about $19.4 million for that 3 months. The health department, because it is non-countywide, actually has their own fund balance. And as you will see, the end of the year with maintaining 3 months, almost $177,000 above that in terms of unassigned fund balance as a result. So as we go through this process this year, one of our recommendations is that we allow by policy, an exception to policy, to exceed the 3-month fund balance, to reserve those funds for potential other needs in the public health as we look at the next couple of years, what might be in front of us. And we'll talk through that here in a little bit more. And then finally, also you'll see on page 111, us talking about contingency. We will continue to reserve specifically about $500,000 of contingency. That is a normal number that we have reserved. This past year we reserved more due to some unknowns, and we did not need to use the full amount of money. So we'll continue to maintain that. That includes our vested benefit contingency. Some of the other challenges that we face, not only for us, but other entities like this, continues to be our insurance. Not only our health insurance is about a 10% increase this year, but other insurance that we had to have in place for the county. Our general liability, we expect to see less than a 10-digit increase, which actually is pretty good. And we are recommending at this point in time that we not increase what's called our SIR, our self-insured retention, or i.e. our deductible. Right now that is $250,000. But in future years, we may need to increase that to look at the reduction of our premium cost. We already talked about the IBNR, but part of this is the ongoing need for our policy updates and training, because those things help us when we look at litigation and potential liability exposure. Cybersecurity, we could talk for a while to the concerns and impacts of not only cybersecurity, but the insurance related to it. But it's a market that's changing very quickly as we look at the future related to ransomware and all those kind of items. For municipalities and local governments like us, it is getting very tough to get cyber insurance. Because of the attacks that have taken place. And so we are going to continue to monitor this and provide advice of where we need to look forward. But it continues to mean that we have to look at investment of protecting our systems and training. One thing is, you just heard Moody's reports. We are starting to see that they may look at your cybersecurity and abilities more and more of a bond rating, because if you think about some of the communities that have been exposed, it's an unfunded liability. And so something we got to look at. Auto insurance, we don't expect too much change there, mainly because we've modernized the fleet and we don't have a lot of cars over 7 years old anymore. That has actually reduced our insurance costs or maintained it flat. And then workers' comp, we're going to continue to work with WMIC, and we continue to be better at being self-insured versus insuring through a normal insurance process. And then finally, some key things I just want to point out that are a little bit different than normal for some departments specifically. So first is the public health. We are setting up an operational reserve as part of this budget. They received another round of grant funding that's close to over $890,000. Some of those funds are being allocated within the budget, specifically for like the epidemiologist position that's contracted for, and an LPN nurse that's being requested to assist with medical assisted treatment. But there's some funds that are set aside for potential needs related to COVID vaccines and restoring services in public health. And so that's being set aside as an operational reserve. There's a total of 3 grants, and they'll have through 2024 to use those funds in most cases. This also develops a tier for looking at the flexibility for unknown expenditures. The first tier would be focused in on those grant dollars to reallocate. The second tier is using those fund balances that we expect, which will be approaching $350,000 at the end of 2021. The benefit of this is we had reserved through carryover in this year's budget roughly $250,000 as contingency for the public health. With doing this, we free those dollars up that can be reallocated to other general fund needs within the county. And then finally, as we get into the ARPA conversation here shortly, we have the Joint Committee has reserved $1 million of those funds for potential need. If they're not needed, those funds, again, can be reallocated in the future. Fair Park. We are getting closer to the Fair Park operation to being off the levy. We have $20,000 that is being outside of capital expenditures that are being allocated to that operation. We are also establishing an operational reserve in that department, currently we are throwing almost about $70,000 of revenue over projected expenditures in the Fair Park, which includes the fair and Fair Park itself, the 2 separate business units. We are reserving it to make sure we can preserve in case we have a reduction in revenue streams, but also seeing how we move, may increase some staffing needs out in the Fair Park as well, specifically looking at grounds work and potentially some marketing efforts going forward. One thing that is also new at the Fair Park that is a little bit of an eye-opener to this price is we are taking over the auction that takes place during the fair, the meat animal auction that was historically run by the 4-H program. We have assumed those responsibilities, and what that means is you'll see an additional cash in of $300,000 roughly and a cash out of $300,000. We are also adding a part-time staff to assist with overseeing the auction items. And then Sheriff's Department, one item that has impacted the budget, which made the budget a little bit challenging this year, is we had state prisoners the last several years. The state also at the last minute pulled all the state prisoners. For us, that was well over $500,000 in revenue streams. We do not believe that probably is going to be sustainable when you look at where the state is at with correctional officers and their staff. They're roughly 40% staff, Chief, right, in that neighborhood right now for prisons. So we expect at some point we'll have some of them back. We are budgeting $250,000 for that, but we also have in our fund balance a reserve of $250,000 in case that is sustained, so the county is covered from that front. And then finally, in Human Services, we've had a reserve fund in Human Services for the last several years, but I just want to highlight this a little bit as we look at some of the potential concerns there. We have reserved $650,000 in Human Services. Really, this is based on concerns of hospitalization costs and placements that might take place. Sometimes when we have placements specifically out of state, that can cost close to $30,000 a month in some cases. And so we want to make sure we have a reserve in case we have several placements that may take place. Our team does very well to try to limit those, but again, a protection for the county going forward. So on page 45 to 50 is a whole narrative talking about the American Rescue Plan Act and some of the actions that have taken place, and kind of talks through the resolution that the board passed and the work that the Joint Committee has done in overseeing that. This first page, I know it's a lot on there, so you can look at it in your book, but talks about specifically the allocation for 2022. You'll see things such as working on our housing in terms of the opportunities properties. That's the first line of administration. We are looking at bringing on a legal assistant for the district attorney's office for the next 3 years. One of the provisions of the ARPA is you can use it to get caught up on backlog cases. In Veteran Services, the same thing, hiring a benefits assistance to help with some of the back row cases related to serving our veterans.
In administration, we are looking at bringing a project manager to help with our communities on housing. We've done numerous studies related to housing, what the affordability to homelessness, etc. And so this position can potentially help with moving those items forward. We're also looking at some capital projects, specifically human services related to LED lighting and HVAC systems at several of their buildings. And then we use some of the funds already for technology and enhancements for COVID mitigation. In the Sheriff's Department, we are increasing our mental health capacity from a 24-hour-a-week role to a full-time role down mental health. We are seeing a lot of concerns in our jail population, and we feel we need to service them better. And then finally, in administration, we're looking at strategic marketing with Discover Wisconsin, a 3-year project. So that price you see in there is for 3 years, and that's going to work with all our stakeholders. And then finally, for Fair Park, we're looking at some improvements to our Egg Building and Activity Center with $500,000 to promote tourism and travel. Then the next 2 slides are ongoing costs. So some of those things that you saw on the first slide relate to some interim personnel staffing, and these are the costs over the next in 23 and 24 that have been reserved. And then this last slide is really focused on some of the bigger costs going forward. They have been reserved, but can always be reallocated as conditions change on the ground. And the one big item I did want to point to as we talk about bonding and cost of the building is that we have technically reserved $7 million of the American Rescue Plan Act towards the courthouse, jail, sheriff project to potentially reduce that bond cost. We are still continuing to look at the ability to do that, but specifically called out in the American Rescue Plan Act relates to things of HVAC, specifically in congregate settings and improvements, which many of our parts of our facility will qualify for. So that could change, but that is what the committee the Joint Committee thought would be a worthwhile item to look at. We've also reserved things for things such as supporting economic assistance to businesses, individuals, and nonprofits. We're waiting to see what the next few years look like, if we need to execute that or not. We reserve money for some clean water initiatives that's specifically called out within the ARPA, and that was some based on a comprehensive plan, some items that we can look at. And then obviously, as the committee is aware, we have reserved over $2 million for potential match with broadband grants as well. So countywide personnel, we'll try to keep moving on this, but I think the one thing I just want to highlight, we hear about the marketplace for labor across the country and in the state and in this region, and Jefferson County as an employer is not immune to those issues. We continue to look at how we can recruit and retain our employees. We did do a market adjustment study this past year to look at our comparable counties because we were falling behind. That recommendation to get caught up was a 3% adjustment at the beginning of the year, and to maintain where we're heading, a 2% mid-year adjustment. That is all built into this budget to be afforded, but as we look at, as we compete, those are things that we thought were needed to move forward. We need to continue to look at it in some certain functional areas, and we may need to be creative as we look at that, specifically in some of our professional staff, our IT staff, and other areas moving forward. We're also seeing we need to shift our entry grades, our grades 1, 2, and 3. Those are some of our grounds workers, as an example, custodian staff. But if you look at where the pay was, we can't bring folks in where that expectation was. So we will actually be proposing, as part of this budget, compression of the first few grades, and they actually are seeing a need for a 4% adjustment so we can compete of the labor of our surrounding counties. Most of this was really planned for. We did reserve for many of these things related to our market study adjustment, but also restoring some positions really like GIS as part of our comprehensive plan study. And the thing that comes up too is ongoing succession planning and training. And so one thing I just want to quick point to is some of the training we've done the last 3 years and continue to work on. In some ways, because of remote access, we've been able to accelerate some training opportunities. So these last 3 years, we've had 15 graduates of the WCA Local Government Leadership Academy, which is an 8-month course. And so the pictures you actually see are 2 of our classes that were in person who got to graduate at the WCA conference. And you see some of these faces who were interim or not quite department heads yet, who are now department heads. And that was part of the plan. And the lower right is this just occurred at the last WCA conference. So we actually had 6 of our teams graduate as well. So again, we highest number of participants in that program, and something we're going to continue to move forward. We've also had 3 graduates of our NACRE Leadership Academy. One is in here in the room. Amy Listel, our Fair Park Director, went through that as she transitioned to her role as the department head.
And then WCTC offered some trainings for us specifically of leadership. That was an 8-week course, and we've had over 49 of our various levels of management take place in that the last 2 years as well. So we talked about the flexibility skill sets and the budget react to the environment in front of us, but a lot of us really needs to look at the sustainability. The one thing I don't want to be in position is saying we're gonna promote a full-time job, knowing that in 2 years it's not here without full disclosure. We're looking at being more of like a limited role, and so that's something we want to be very cognizant of. But there's also ongoing needs, not just with traditional skill sets we think of, but as the Finance Committee heard, the ongoing need for interpreters, and what does that look like for the future of county so we can provide the full service needed to our customers and key stakeholders. One thing that you'll see, and it's going to be introduced tonight, but it's included in the budget, is change to the compensation also for the county board members. And so you'll see the ordinance that has to be approved if you choose to go forward, needs to be approved by the county board by November 9th, but the full budget impact has been calculated into the budget. What's being recommended to the board is that the monthly salary of board members increase from $55 per month to $110 per month. Your per diem per meeting would increase from $55 to $65. There would be no limit, by the way, on those meetings. Currently, if you do not know, there's a limit of 3 meetings per day that you can get a per diem for. And then finally, the chair's monthly salary would remain at $550, but the chair would be eligible for that per diem meeting cost to increase to $65. We're expecting that cost for 2022 to be roughly $25,000, give or take, with an ongoing increased cost about roughly $34,000 to $35,000. A mileage reimbursement would be based on our typical IRS travel rates that are required. So here are some of our quick key position changes, and if you look in your budget book, you can see the specific chart related to that on page 88 to 91. So in administration, please don't be shocked by this. I'm adding a psychotherapist position to the administration. So no, the reason we're doing that is a treatment courts coordinator actually falls underneath my role as a direct report up to me. And we are seeking a grant to expand our treatment court, both our alcohol treatment court and drug treatment court, to include a psychotherapist position to specifically work with those folks going through that program. That person will be supervised by Kathy Cawley and her staff over there, but from a budgetary standpoint, we're also showing administration. The other thing I do want to highlight is we are changing the position that's been funded this last year that I have not filled yet. Not as a management analyst, but as we look at some of these studies to be more of a projects and relations analyst. We are looking at bringing on a full-time facilities director position that's going to oversee all the facilities within the county, and that would be a department head position that would report to me. In the judicial side, we are unfunding currently our register and probate, which had been filled typically as an attorney, and in increasing the support staff to 2 in that office. We are looking at some potential changes of structures and processes within the judicial system here in Jefferson County, and so we want to be prepared so we can react to those needs of the court system. And right now, in conversations with the presiding judge, we feel this is the best thing for the interim. As mentioned, district attorney, we're adding a legal assistant. We're also adding a 1-year assistant district attorney. We have one of our ADAs is being deployed for the military. The state will not fund that. And so we, to assist that office, we have agreed to fund that position. Economic development, this is more just us changing from a professional service to an intern LTE role. This is formally merging also our land info with our zoning department and also adding a new GIS position to that team. Although not spelled out, we are looking at some of the items in the highway operations, specifically looking at greater collaboration. So an example that was brought up in the Finance Committee was the work of Brian Udovich in the park, who is our operations manager, who's also an engineer, working with the Parks Department on the interurban trail and how good of that partnership is to collaborate. That also includes GIS as well. And in Fair Parks, we kind of talked through that items a little bit already, and some of it really relates to the, a change of operations for groundwork and an auction person. MIS, this will help Dave, who's in this room, but we are adding a new, we're recommending to add a new help desk person. As we have mentioned, we probably have over doubled the devices in the last few years within the county, and so we have not added MIS staff to help support team. So this position is much needed. Our medical examiner, we are increasing her assistant deputy role from a 0.19 to a benefit of 0.8, which will continue to receive per diem due to the ever increasing calls and complexities of the cases they get called out on. Parks, we are adjusting to add buildings and ground supervisors, which also is going to unfund one of our park supervisors. An important position is in the sheriff's office. We have not added a dispatcher in forever, right, Jeff? And so this is definitely a need that we have. Both the fact is we have a lot of overtime going on in that department right now to cover down on 24/7 operation. But we have greater demands as we meet the needs of our EMS and fire customers specifically. As you may know, we had to change some of the protocol to a system with MABUS calls, which is the mutual aid box alarms, just to help them with their staffing requirements, but also some of the future requirements as we look at some of the emergency medical dispatching we are going to be asked to do from the state, and that's going to help position us for that going forward. We're going to refund the intern and UW extension program. We already talked about the additional benefit specialist in the veterans office. That will be a ARPA, and then we're going to add a intern or contract with UW Whitewater with zoning. We have done this in the past when Andy was here to help with some of the GIS projects. It's a great relationship with the UW Whitewater to continue that going forward. Health department, just there's some key changes going on here as well. Obviously, we continue to manage what is going on, reducing staff hours or increasing staff hours based on the conditions on the grounds. One of the biggest things is really restarting and maintain our full public health services that we are asked to do, non-COVID, right? Keep those going. We also have some key positions that are retiring, and so we're preparing for that transition and what that needs to look like to meet the needs of the future. And so this includes a placeholder of the epidemiologist, but we're going to maintain this being a contracted position for the time being. And as I mentioned before, we're adding LPN role, or licensed practical nurse, that will also assist with human services of treatment and other public health programs. And in human services, where we typically see a lot of changes going on, in the admin division, we are seeing some transition related to our billing IT supervisor with ongoing needs for billing specifically. This is also going to see the transition as we look at that central facilities director taking place and some changes of that staff over there. ADRC, this is more of a transitional of the mobility manager changing to a transportation supervisor. Now, I started this because this role could be more than just looking at ADRC as we look at the complexity of transportation. There's some models in here that we can look at that could impact countywide. So in many cases, folks can't go between cities. Many cases because of contracts that are in place. And what we're looking at is how do we expand it. So if you need to go from Jefferson to Fort Atkinson for a medical appointment, is there a better way to provide it? And maybe not just medical appointment, quite frankly, because those are a lot of times covered. What if you want to go shopping up in the outlet malls in Johnson Creek and you don't have transportation? So we're looking at that and obviously looking at employment parts of that. We're looking at pool of van drivers, and there's an initiative that the department is also looking at, is working with some of our service organizations to look at volunteer with a paid contribution to the organization as a service project to bring on more volunteer drivers. And in behavioral health, it goes back to what I mentioned, the ongoing demand and needs for mental health services in our various programs in CSP and CCS. So we're adding those additional positions to meet those demand. And finally, in child and family, we're adding 4 CLTS. And this is really focused on keeping kids off the wait list and keep them going to programs for the betterment of those kiddos. So overall, if you look at page 92 and 96, this spells out all the positions that are authorized in the county. With county staff specifically, we have about 633 positions right now. When you add in the state positions that we work with routinely, we're at about 651. So that 630 includes U.S. 30 county board members as employees, so also recognize it's not all full-time employees. So capital, if you look in the back of the book, it's basically based on 469. What I'm showing here right now is the overall roll-up of capital projects among the various items that are out there. So we're looking at an overall budget of about 9.5 million. So this includes our operational capital. This includes the building project initial estimate, and this also includes our highway projects. Well, there's more than that built in there. So 468, I will not read this to you, but primarily this will spell out the various departments of what they're looking at. The one thing I do want to highlight in the Sheriff's Department is this is buying 6 new vehicles, but one thing we are looking at operationally is take-home vehicles related to the Sheriff's Department. There's some operational considerations that are positive and policies we have to look at, but we need to run the numbers out more. The one thing is this. We just ordered the vehicles and we probably don't get them till 2023. And so that's going to be a challenge I'll talk about here in a little bit. But just like many of the other folks, some of the supply chain issues are catching up with us. So as we look at these programs, we got to factor that in too. Again, more operational capital. I think the one thing that's common thing that you'll see in the operational capital for the most part this year, it's focused on equipment and vehicles for folks to sustain their operation versus necessarily new projects. Specifically, I'll use examples Parks Department. The interurban project is going to be a massive project that we'll be undertaking, so they're going to really focus their project resources on those efforts for oversight for next year. And then here's quickly the highway department specifically focused on their equipment and their depreciation account and what they're looking at, and then IT. So again, if you have questions on those specific things, it's in the back of the book, but we can talk through them more if you have any specific questions. So quick miscellaneous capital items. This is the second year of formalizing our internal fleet management project, phase 3. And so those page numbers talk about what's being invested in there, both from a capital standpoint, but we are beginning to create operational revenue to support that program going forward. The flood mitigation program is well underway, and that's over $3 million that we expect to be spending between this year going to next year. You'll see this part of our carryover request for next year. And that assists with the acquisition, demo, and as I said, be part of carryover. Communication project is almost towards the end. Our buildings are being installed, equipment being installed, and we expect that it'll be substantially complete by the first quarter with acceptance the second quarter of 2022. South Campus, the water main is almost done, not quite at the end of September as I said, but probably hopefully by the end of this week going to next week. But then our highway department's going to go right in there and do repaving, expansion of parking lots, and repave Annex Road. If you have not been on Annex Road lately, we're out of seal coat that we can put in those cracks right now. So it's pretty bad. So, but we're ready to move that forward. Broadband, our fixed wireless sites are operational with our partners that also align with our communication project. And hopefully by the end of October, we will know where our fiber project are heading. We can update the board on that. Finalizing some DNR closeout work we have to do on highway property. We're also trying to market it for private development. Interurban, we have just turned in our 60% design to the state for review. Our engineer has actually 85% design complete, which was just transmitted to the county for review for our comments. But we're looking at going to bid basically in February with the county board approving those bids in March of 2022. And then obviously we've been talking a lot about the courthouse project, but we're looking at the first bid package going out towards the end of first quarter of 2022 on that as well. And then finally, one thing we are looking at investing in is an overall new asset management program that's going to tie to Munis to help us do a better job of calculation of these investments that we are making. So the next two slides quickly talk about our highway projects. So for 2022, and you can look at page 398 for the nicer maps, but also 401, 402 talk about the specific description of those projects, is rehab of County Highway 8 for going from State Highway 106 up to Lake Mills. There's a portion we've already done, so we're not going to redo that. But that's going to connect to that work that's already been done. And then some rehabilitation work on County Highway S off of A going towards up to County Highway B. Total projected cost for that is about $4.3 million. And as a reminder, we pay as we go for our road projects. We don't bond for our road projects. So that's all operational cash to keep that going. Here is the 5-year plan. Again, you can look at the pages in your book, and then specifically 403 and 408 gives a little more details of what those projects do look like. One thing that, and we're trying to maintain at roughly $3.5 to $4 million investment in a year to keep churning the system. And our aim is to get the system turnover about once every 20 to 25 years is really our goal of what we've developed. One thing that the Finance Committee and Highway Committee has gotten here is we are looking at some different ongoing maintenance ideas, changes. So in the past, after roughly 8 to 10 years, we typically would do that seal coating when you come out with the oil and those rocks and all that fun stuff that we get claims for windshields and all that. What we're looking at is a little bit more of a maintenance coat of asphalt as a trial basis to help really seal that in and a little bit nicer. So if you have not been out in Exonia lately, that is exactly what's going on County Highway F, is not a full rehabilitation resurface, but a minor mill and resurfacing to trying to protect that surface and looking at how does that look at it from a long-term cost standpoint, and is that better than that seal coating that we've used to do historically. So more to follow on that. And then almost to the end here, some things just to keep on your horizon. So I mentioned already, we are exploring some of the long lead items And we've talked to the finance committee a little bit, looking at ordering these things now. Vehicles are significantly delayed as we look at highway big trucks. In some cases, those could be 2 to 3 years potentially out. So we may see some bigger bid packages to get those things ordered in advance in anticipation of future budgets coming forward. Technology is another big thing. We are working over the last 6 months plus almost, Dave, right, on replacing our wireless access points. We still don't have them all yet. Now, typically you would think that's something in the past you could go off the shelf and you'd have it. We don't. So part of the budget for technology for next year, we're looking at those lead times, and we're going to look at ordering some of those things in advance. Ironically, one of the things that's holding up deployment of computers right now are docking stations. And if you have not seen the new docking stations, they almost look like a hockey puck now. They don't have enough microchips to make those things work. So we have computers, but we don't have the docking stations to make things talk. So more to come on that. Opioid lawsuits. If you've looked in the news, we're looking at some settlements, bankruptcies, and all that coming forward. We'll be having a conversation with all you shortly on a potential settlement to talk through by the end of this year. We anticipate, however, we'll start to see some of those proceeds from those actions in the first or second quarter of 2022. And we'll be looking through the various ways those funds can be used that are provided by the court. We've already talked about the ARPA items, and then we talked about staffing. I just don't need to keep going through that in general. So in general, I just before we finish up here, I just want to say thank you. Today was a great example. So we got our sale done, and if you don't know it, those 1 cent changes about 30 pages in your budget book. And so between Mark and Tammy in his office, and then Tammy in my office, and Kathy Hart down the central distribution, they redid the budget books, because what we didn't want to have happen is give you a draft document today and change all those when we knew we had the numbers. So, but it's more of that team effort. There's some big conversations that we need to continue to have. And so I just want to thank you for the support of the board, and especially the finance committee for helping us out as we look at the policy decisions and making this budget. There are a lot of good things in this budget. There's a lot of good things to create sustainability, a lot of things to move the county forward, a lot of things to get the county in a position to react to emerging needs and trends of the ecosystems that are around us. And so if you have any questions, please reach out to Mark or I or the department heads as we look ahead to the future. And that leads us to the next steps of the process. So in your budget books, you have the traditional memo for budget amendment processes and kind of outlines it, but some key dates to look ahead to the future. Tomorrow we will have the budget fully posted online for the public to review. The next basically month and a half plus is the opportunities for supervisors to look at making budget amendments, and there's a spreadsheet form. If you like the Excel email to you, let Mark or I know so you can fill in digitally if you would like. We are asking those to be in my office by November 1st. The main reason for that is so if there are changes, we can look financially what that means to make recommendations or what the impacts are to the budget. As I mentioned, what you might think is one change might change 30 pages in that budget book. And so that's why we just want to make sure everyone has full transparency in those potential changes. As a reminder, in 2 weeks is the public hearing taking place here in this room. And then on November 4th, the Finance Committee will meet to consider any amendments that come forward. As a reminder, as policy, the Finance Committee gives a recommendation yea or nay, but all amendments that are turned in still come to the full county board floor for consideration. So even if the Finance Committee votes not recommend it, that will still come to the county board floor for consideration. And then finally, November 9th is when you formally will take up the budget and any other considerations. So with that being said, Mr. Chair, I apologize for it going this long, but we went fast.
Any questions we have at this moment? Supervisor Schultz.
Not really a question, but I want to compliment you and your staff. I look at this and I think this is awesome amount of work. It's incredible. I want to thank you for a job well done.
Thank you. And like I mentioned, it's a team effort, right? Because that's a lot of work that takes place. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Supervisor Duran.
Again, just a couple of comments. Supervisor Schultz, I want to thank the Finance Committee, Ben, and the Finance Director for this book. This is amazing. The budget hearings, I took advantage of attending each one of them via Zoom and listening to each one of the county board heads and listen. Okay. It also gave me the opportunity to ask questions. That was great. I did note each day though, it was myself and at least one other county board member, maybe two. That was it. Nobody else. It was disappointing. I think this is one of the biggest things we do right here, and the more we know about it, the better off we are. You know, I'm doing a next big vote when the vote comes around. So maybe next year if I'm doing this, I certainly will attend, but I would encourage everybody to do it. Thank you.
Supervisor Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Supervisor Drana. I only made 2 of the days. He made all of it. He was there all the time. But I did have a compliment I wanted to pass on. That was, of course, the committees that I'm involved with. I appreciate the team that they sent, Land and Water and Parks. But Bill Kern did a presentation on highways that I wish I had a copy of that. Turns out that wasn't recorded, but it was instructional in a way that I haven't heard before. He really did a fantastic job. I wish I could pass that off to our town of Koshkonong road supervisor because he did a great job. And I, like Dave said, I recommend people attend those next year. They're pretty interesting.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you very much, Ms. Waymeyer. I have a brief little thing I'd like to take up with the board here. I made a mistake earlier under Planning and Zoning Committee. When I came back up here, we never completed item D. So I'd like to proceed with that. And the second thing is, we've been here in 2.5 hours. If we get past item D, would you like a 5-minute break?
Yes.
Thought so. Okay, so let's take item D under 8D, Mr. Jekyll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Resolution number 2021
38.
amending Jefferson County Land Information Plan. Land Information Plan for Jefferson County was prepared by Land Information Office and Land Information Council with input from numerous county departments. Wisconsin Statute 5972, parent 3, parent B requires countywide plan for land record and modernization. In order to make counties eligible to participate in the Wisconsin Land Information Program, the purpose of the County Land Information Plan is 1, to meet the Wisconsin Land Information Program funding eligibility requirements necessary for receiving grants and retaining fees for land information services, and 2, to plan for county land information modernization in order to provide improved government services to county residents and businesses. The Wisconsin Land Information Plan receives $7 for each document recorded by the Jefferson County Register of Deeds, which is used to fund Wisconsin Land Information Program grants and program administration. In addition, the County Land Record Information Program retains $8 for each document recorded by the Jefferson County Register of Deeds. This updated plan provides plan for how funds will be utilized to maintain and improve the Jefferson County Land Information Program. Land Information Council met on July 27, 2021, and approved the update to the Land Information Plan. The Planning and Zoning Committee met on September 27, 2021, and recommended forwarding this resolution to the County Board to approve the 2021 amendment to the Jefferson County Land Information Plan. Fiscal note, the Land Information Plan will help guide land information program expenses from 2022 to 2024. Land Information Program is a non-tax levy program. No additional tax levy dollars will be used. I move for the passage of this resolution.
Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Lindell. Questions? Comments? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Hearing none, it passes. Let's take a 5-minute break. Please return by 9:20. Excuse me, 9:40.
They have
Everybody has to agree 100%. It's never gonna happen. It doesn't happen up here.
We are to item number 10. Item number 10, Executive Committee. Supervisor Renard.
Ordinance number 2021
11.
11. Amending the supervisor's salary and compensation ordinance. County Board Supervisor salaries and compensation are required to be established prior to election papers being available for the next election. This requires that any changes to the current salary and compensation ordinance be made prior to December 1, 2021. The current salary structure was implemented on January 1, 2003, and has not been amended since. Based on requests by various county board supervisors, the executive committee undertook a review of the current salary structure. This review included comparable county pay structures and cost of living adjustments since 2003. The executive committee reviewed this information and recommended 5-0 that the county board supervisor monthly salary increase from $55 to $110, and the per diem rate per meeting increase from $55 to $65, with the county board chair salary remaining at $550 per month as established in 2002. The chair will be paid the same per diem rate as other county board supervisors. The current per diem structure limits per diem fees to a maximum of 3 meetings per day. This ordinance amendment removes this limitation. The additional $25 payment for meetings that exceed 4 hours will increase to $30. The projected increase for this change is approximately $36,500 annually. This increase has been included in the proposed 2022 budget as recommended by the Finance Committee. The effective date of this ordinance amendment will be May 1st, 2022. The Executive Committee considered this ordinance amendment at its meeting on August 31st, 2021 and September 29th, 2021, and recommended forwarding to the County Board for approval. Fiscal note, the increase in per diem and monthly salary amounts and benefits, including federal Social Security and Medicare tax, is estimated to cost approximately $36,500 annually. These increases have been included in the 2022 proposed budget. Mr. Chair, I move approval of this ordinance.
Is there, who was the second? Second by Mr. Christensen. Discussion. Discussion, questions? Supervisor Jacob.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm not that involved. I heard it was coming through when we did our finance stuff. Just a question or clarification. If we checked what the surrounding counties like Dodge or something is doing, is theirs similar, or, you know, or are they still way under? I mean, not that I'm complaining by any means, because I know people of all the years I've went out and got papers, they've always said, "You're doing it for that? There ain't no way I would do it for that kind of money." And I said, well, that's, you know, it's a passion for most of us, I think. So, you know, it's, you know, I just was curious on that aspect.
Do you want to answer that, Ms. Menard?
I guess the answer is that our staff put out surveys or questionnaires or whatever to surrounding counties. We got quite a number of them back. I don't know, it was like 10 at least, wasn't it? And what we learned was that everybody does it differently. It's all over the board. It's really wild. I mean, some counties have a salary for their vice chair. We've never done that, and I'm not recommending that we do. But it's just all over the place. So what we did was we looked at all the comparables, and we came up with something we thought was reasonable. that brings us a little bit more in line with some of what other counties are doing and what we thought was reasonable for and fiscally, wise for Jefferson County.
Thank you.
Supervisor Schultz.
Yes, I just wanted to make note, and I think most everybody in this room realizes this, and I think it's even the law. This will not apply to this board. We have an election coming up in April, and this will then apply to the new board. I think, am I wrong, or isn't that the law? That's the only way you can.
That is correct, Supervisor Schultz, and that's why this has to be done by December 1st when people would take out papers.
Yeah, but it will be for the new board, will not be for us. I think that's important to note. Unless you win re-election.
Supervisor Smith.
A decade ago, when I heard what the salaries for people were, at times when I was in line at Walmart or somewhere, and I'd ask them what they thought a county board supervisor made, the average answer was $12,000 to $15,000 a year. So, in looking at this, I don't know how you came up with it. I personally would want to get paid by my contribution and what I do. And we're working within a system that the person who does the very least is probably who gets paid the most. Somebody who actually attends the meetings that you want us to attend, that person's going to be making $1.80 an hour, while somebody who doesn't do any reading or whatever might actually make more than the minimum wage. So the whole process I would find a question with. But if you put these salaries into an inflation calculator, it comes up with basically just shy of $83 if you take $55 in 2003. So nobody here is actually going to get a raise. That when you look at what we're getting, we're going to get paid less than what somebody did doing this job 18 years ago. And then you look at what they came up with our job responsibilities, which I would question that anyone, at least as I read it a year ago when I got this job, it was suggested I read something. And I read that I'm supposed to contact all the businesses in my district. I'm supposed to contact the county around me to see what they're doing and pay attention to what they're doing. I'm supposed to contact my state representatives to work with them to see what I can do with the county. And, I would question that anybody here is actually doing the job that we're supposed to be doing. So, at least I know I'm not. I don't know, possibly you are, but from what I read, what the job description was for this job, I can't say that I've done it. So I would at least like to have this adjusted to the cost of living and just put it across the board, make it $83 for everything, and then we can say we're getting paid what somebody did when they did this job in 2003, that at least we're comparable with them.
Any other questions, discussion, comments? Seeing none? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
One opposed. Takes us to Finance Committee, 11B, considering a claim for property damage of Lisa Legge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Resolution number 2021-39, considering claim for property damage of Lisa Legge. A property damage claim has been made against Jefferson County by Lisa Legge for damage to her motor vehicle. The claim has been reviewed by the county insurance carrier WMIC and was recommended for disallowance based on the finding that the county has no liability for this claim and is not legally responsible for the alleged damages. This resolution formally denies the claim filed against Jefferson County and directs the Corporation Council to give the claimant notice of disallowance. The Finance Committee considered this resolution on October 7, 2021, and recommended forwarding to the County Board to deny the property damage claim of Lisa Legge. The matter has been referred, fiscal note, the matter has been referred to the Wisconsin Municipal Mutual Insurance Company, WMIC, and will be resolved in accordance with terms of the county's policy. Mr. Chair, I move for passage of this resolution.
Second by Supervisor Jekyll. Questions? Comments? Supervisor Kennard.
I guess I'm getting back to that fiscal note. It's going back to WMIC, and they've already determined that the county has no liability, so do we even need a fiscal note?
I don't know. Is it a big burden?
No, that fiscal note kind of seems like the insurance company's gonna pay them whatever they're due, but we already said they're due nothing, so it just kind of seems like, I don't know.
Care to comment on that?
The county board formally denying a claim has certain legal implications that protects the county down the road. That's why we do it. It doesn't mean we can't resolve the claim. It doesn't mean we're not going to get sued in the future because of this claim. So what we want to do is we want to protect ourselves by taking formal action that limits the time period that the claimant can sue the county if they choose to sue the county, and gives us certain other defenses. So that's basically allowing the county insurance company to negotiate a settlement if a settlement is warranted. But at this point, it's the position of the county and the insurance company that the county has no legal liability. If negotiations for resolution should change that position, then that gives the insurance company an option to settle.
Any other questions, comments? Voice vote, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. Takes us to Human Resources Committee. Supervisor Brogler.
Resolution number 2021-40, amending the retiree addendum to the group master policy for Dean Health Plan by reducing the eligibility for retirees to under the age of 65 or Medicaid, Medicare eligible. On September 11, 2018, the County Board entered into an intergovernmental cooperation agreement to authorize the consortium for joint purchasing of employee benefits and designated Dean Health Plan as the health insurance provider for the consortium effective January 1, 2019. The Jefferson County offered health insurance to all eligible active employees through the Dean Health Plan. In addition, as provided in the retiree addendum to the group master policy, the county offers health insurance to an employee who is actively employed by the county, insured by a group plan offered by the county, and eligible for Wisconsin retirement annuity or Social Security. Retired employees and their dependents may remain on the plan until the retiree dies or until the county cancels the policy. If the retiree dies, the spouse will be allowed to continue their coverage on the same terms as the retiree's coverage at the time of death. The retiree or surviving spouse is responsible for 100% of the health insurance premiums. The county reserves the right at any time and for any reason to amend the plan, to modify plan benefits, or to terminate the plan and discontinue benefits with respect to all retirees and/or class of retirees. Retirees are currently offered the same plan designs as are offered to active employees. As a step to curtail the increasing cost of health insurance while still offering an affordable plan in the marketplace and accomplishing a goal to be consistent with the majority of the other members of the Intergovernmental Consortium, the Human Resource Director and County Administrator are recommending an amendment to the retiree health coverage plan as follows. 1. The retiree employee and their dependents may remain on the plan until the retiree reaches the age 65 or becomes eligible for Medicare Medicaid coverage. Retirees on the retiree health insurance as of December 31st, 2021 will be offered continuation of coverage as allowed through COBRA and the Dean Health Plan, or if not eligible for COBRA, grandfathered to remain on the plan through December 31st, 2022. 2. If the retiree dies, the spouse or any dependents will be offered continuation of the coverage as allowed through COBRA. Surviving dependents on the retiree health insurance as of December 31st, 2021 will be offered continuation of coverage as allowed through COBRA and the Dean Health Plan, or if not eligible for COBRA, grandfathered to remain on the plan through December 31st, 2022. 3. The Jefferson County Administrator, with the approval of the Human Resource Committee, will have the option to offer retiree a plan design which is different than what is offered to active employees. The plan or plans offered to retirees may change based on a number of factors, including premium rate increases and medical loss ratio analysis. The plan designs offered to retirees will be determined by the County Administrator no later than November 1st of each year and in alignment with others in the consortium. On September 21st, 2021, the Human Resource Committee reviewed the request from the Human Resource Director and County Administrator to amend the retiree addendum to the Group Master Health Policy with Dean Health Plan as described above. The Human Resource Committee considered this resolution at its meeting on September 21st, 2021, and is recommending forward to the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors for approval. I move for passage.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I didn't catch who that was. Supervisor Falconer as a second. Discussion, questions? Supervisor Backman.
I just got a quick question then, the way I read this. So if a retiree and a spouse, he turned 65, she's 63, so he's out of the plan, and that means she's out without insurance too, is that correct? Okay.
Any other questions? Have a voice vote, or Supervisor Smith?
How is this different than what we currently have?
Do you want to, Supervisor Proctor? Mr. Waymire, do you want to?
So Terry's here, so I'll start and she needs to correct me. So currently when an employee retires from the county, whether it's before 65 or after 65, they can pay 100% of the premium cost for the same plan that active employees have, but they have to pay 100%. The difference is if you look at the fiscal note, if they went to marketplace, there's an actuarial analysis that goes, if you had to go by yourself, where actually the county is subsidizing that plan because it'd be more costly if you had to go out on the marketplace potentially. And so part of the reason we're looking at this is the fact is there is a factor that goes into our experience to determine the cost of the insurance that plays a role in this overall. We started with specifically 65 and older because we can work with our M3 consultant to help find products that work for those retirees for their lifestyle, which means like if they're traveling a lot, as an example, if they have a spouse that might be younger, as an example, to find that right package that might be offered in the marketplace or as a supplement through Medicare or Medicaid kind of scenarios. And so what this does, it also gives them an additional year if you look at the COBRA language and the grandfather clause. So it's not just a knee-jerk overnight, that they still can pay that 100% because that's basically what COBRA is. You're paying 100% of that premium anyhow. So they have that additional year to plan for that transition to take place too, as part of what's built into this as well. We currently have about 9 employees that are over 65 that take our full insurance package, not our supplement. And we have about 4 more retired employees that would transition to this age group coming up in the next year. So Terry, did I miss anything with that?
No, I don't think so. The only other thing is just regarding those 4 individuals, they're 64 now, turning 65 next year. I did talk with Dean today, and they will extend that. So they have coverage at the end of the year. So probably 65 in January, not insurance.
Supervisor Brogler.
In reading pages and pages tonight of all of us, I did not read the fiscal note, which probably answers your question. So I'm going to go ahead and read it now. It's pretty much what Ben said, but Jefferson County conducts an actuary study of its liabilities related to offering post-employment health benefits to retirees annually during the preparation of its audited financial statements. The liability is measured by calculating the net present value of all future payments associated with the current retirees in the plan. Although retirees contribute to the plan at employee rates, the premium for retirees would be significantly higher if they purchased health insurance on the market. Therefore, the county is subsidizing the retiree premium by allowing them to participate in the plan at reduced cost. The projected cost of continuing to offer the current retiree health insurance program plan will be $3,816,990 based on the number of retirees in the plan as of December 31st, 2020. The financial impact of this resolution cannot be determined at this time. However, it is expected to produce significant savings in health insurance premiums and a reduction of the post-employer health insurance liability in the future when the results of the experience under this change can be measured.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes. Item 13, Land and Water Conservation, Supervisor Falker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm authorizing the application of implementation of Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources Healthy Lakes. It's resolution number 2021-41, I think. All right. The Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources has a grant program called Healthy Lakes and Rivers, which assists landowners with practice implementation cost related to installation of native plant shoreline gardens and rain gardens. These practices protect the quality of the lakes and rivers. The Jefferson County Land and Water Conservation Department applies for the DNR funds on behalf of property owners who want to install the conservation practices. The Land and Water Conservation Committee considered this resolution at its September 22nd, 2021 meeting and recommended forwarding to the county board to authorize the Land and Water Conservation Department Director to submit a grant application and supporting documents seeking $11,000 in grant funds to the Wisconsin DNR funding to support the Healthy Lakes and Rivers program. Whereas the executive summary is incorporated in this resolution, and whereas the Jefferson County Land and Water Conservation Department is interested in obtaining a cost share grant from Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources for the purpose of implementing conservation practices within 1,000 feet of Jefferson County lakes and 300 feet of Jefferson County rivers. And whereas the Land and Water Conservation Department attests to the validity and veracity of the statements and representations contained in the grant applications, and whereas a grant agreement is requested by the DNR to carry out the project, now therefore be it resolved by the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors that the Land and Water Conservation Department will meet the financial obligations necessary to fully and satisfactorily complete the project and thereby authorize and empowers the Land and Water Conservation Department Director to sign and submit the following documents to the Wisconsin DNR for financial assistance that may be available. Number 1, a grant application. Number 2, a grant agreement with the DNR. Number 3, quarterly and or final reports to the DNR to satisfy the grant agreement as appropriate. And number 4, reimbursement request to the DNR no later than the date specified in the grant agreement. Be it further resolved that the Land and Water Conservation Department will comply with all local, state, and federal rules, regulations, and ordinances relating to this project and the cost share agreement. Fiscal note, the total grant request is $11,000, of which $10,000 will partially fund the cost of implementing the practices with the landowners, covering the remaining implementation costs. The remaining $1,000 of grant will offset the cost of existing Land and Water Conservation Department staff who will provide technical assistance for the projects. Mr. Chair, I move for the passage of Resolution 41.
Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Christensen. Questions? Your comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. Passes on voice. Supervisor Falker.
Okay, resolution number 2021-42, authorizing the application and implementation of Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources Lake Monitoring and Protection Network Grant. The Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources provides annual support to companies for lake monitoring and aquatic invasive species prevention and management activities referenced as the Lake Monitoring and Protection Network Grant. The amount allocated in 2022 for Jefferson County is $13,003.36, and the grant application is required to be submitted to obtain the funds. The Land and Water Conservation Committee considered this resolution at its meeting on September 22nd, 2021, and recommended the forwarding to the county board to apply for and implement the Lake Monitoring Protection Network grant in the amount of $13,003.36. Whereas the executive summary is incorporated in this resolution, and whereas the Land and Water Conservation Department is interested in obtaining a cost share grant from the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources for the purpose of lake monitoring and aquatic invasive species prevention and management activities, whereas the Land and Water Conservation Department attests to the validity and veracity of the statements and representations contained in the grant application, and whereas a grant agreement is requested by the DNR to carry out the project, now therefore be resolved by the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors that the Land and Water Conservation Department will meet the financial obligations necessary to fully and satisfactorily complete the project, and hereby authorizes and empowers the Land and Water Conservation Department Director to sign and submit the following documents to Wisconsin DNR for financial assistance that may be available. 1, a grant application. 2, a grant agreement with the DNR. 3, quarterly and or final reports to the DNR to satisfy the grant agreement as appropriate. And number 4, disbursement request to the DNR no later than the date specified in the grant agreement. Be it further resolved that the Land and Water Conservation Department will comply with all local, state, and federal rules, regulations, and ordinances related to this project and the cost share agreement. Fiscal note, the total grant request is $13,003.36, which will fund the cost of staff time for the prevention management activities referenced in the Lake Monitoring and Protection Network grant. Mr. Chair, I move for passage of resolution 2042.
Do I have a second? Second by Supervisor Christensen. Questions? Comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, passes by voice. Takes us to item 14, Parks Committee, Supervisor Johns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ordinance number 2021-12. Amending the Jefferson County Parks Ordinance to create boat launch fees at Rock River County Park and Cappy's Landing and imposing a forfeiture for non-payment. The Jefferson County Parks Department maintains 2 public boat launches along the Rock River, and one at Rock River County Park and the other at Cappy's Landing. The Parks Committee has determined that charging a boat launch fee will offset some of the costs associated with maintaining the boat launches. Signs have been posted notifying the public of the fee to launch boats and the possible forfeiture for not paying the boat launch fee. The ordinance amends the Jefferson County Parks Ordinance to create Section 8.135, establishing fees for the use of boat launches at Rock River County Park and Cappy's Landing, which will subject any person violating this section of the Parks Ordinance to a forfeiture of not less than $25, nor more than $200, and the cost of prosecution and default of payment, imprisonment not to exceed 90 days. The Parks Committee considered this ordinance amendment at its meeting on August 9th, 2021, and recommended forwarding to the County Board for approval. I'm going to read that. Let's see here. Section 8.135, boat launching at Rock River County Park and Cappy's Landing. No person may launch a boat using the boat launches at Rock River County Park or Cappy's Landing without first paying a boat launch fee of $5 per day or $25 per year to the Jefferson County Parks Department. This ordinance shall be effective after passage and publication as provided by law. The fiscal impact of this ordinance cannot be determined at this time. I move to approve this ordinance.
Do I have a second? A number of seconds. Discussion, questions? Supervisor Drainham.
A question, how is this going to be paid and who's going to enforce it?
It can be paid at the location or it can be paid at the Parks Department here in the building. Either way.
Is like a drop box?
Yeah.
Okay. Who's going to enforce it when what's the enforcement?
The Parks Director has the ability to enforce it, and then also County Sheriff if he happens to be in the area at the time. So somebody obviously could come in and launch a boat and not be caught because there's nobody there. But if there is monitoring by either the Parks Director or County Sheriff's deputy, they would be able to enforce that at the time.
Is it a sticker or just something that goes on the windshield? How do we know that the vehicle's paid?
Good question. I don't have that. We'll find out for you.
Okay.
Any other questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Which takes us to item 15, appointment by County Administrator, Mr. Waymeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. By the authority invested in me under Section 9.18, Parent 2, Parent B of the Wisconsin statute, I respectfully request confirmation of the following appointment. Mr. Michael Winnicky of Watertown, Wisconsin, the Human Services Board for a 3-year term ending November 1st, 2024. I respectfully request confirmation of this appointment.
Second.
A second. So moved by Supervisor Brogger, second by Supervisor Jekyll. Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Mike, you got it till 2024. Is there any public comment of a general nature tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on to announcements. I think the one announcement, Supervisor or Administrator Waymeyer.
So we still have a lot of hecticness ahead of us with a lot of events taking place. So Tammy made a nice little handout. We have emailed this to you too, but it's upcoming committee meetings and board meetings related to redistricting, public hearings, etc. What's not on here also, if you want to have the updates, the Buildings and Grounds Committee is meeting tomorrow at 10 o'clock and on November 3rd at 9 o'clock, I believe, for updates on the building. So if you're interested, come by, but these are the important ones that are on the sheet. There's some different times on here, so I just want to call your attention to that. Specifically, the November 3rd, when you have the public hearing on redistricting, that is a Wednesday night, not a Tuesday. So that's noted on here, that's why it's nice and red for us. November 5th will be an executive committee meeting specifically to review the comments related to the public hearing and the impacts of redistricting. So that will be basically the final review before it comes to the county board. And then November 9th, we are having the pre-meeting with the updates on the project. And that'll be at 6 o'clock, followed by the regular meeting at 7 o'clock. That will be busy too. Not as long as presentations probably, but that's also we budget approval that night and approval of the redistricting districts for supervisory. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any questions, Supervisor Smith?
I had another comment during the castle discussion I didn't make. An easy out for the zoning committee might be to make historical tourism something that would be an acceptable use, and then they could do a deep dive into Jefferson history and put the family arms up or something of historical value that would create a use that would apply to the castle, that, you know, instead of being a barn where, you know, people come to a wedding and look at an old barn and call that agricultural tourism. Thank you.
Any other announcements? Any other announcements? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Second. This is not debatable. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned.
Yeah, I was thinking that today. I'm like, we have to get that's how I can get to it. Yeah. You guys place? No. Right in front of that.